Okay, so we're going. So Drew, thanks for coming today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here, Mark.
I'll just do a quick introduction. So our connection is Paul Cummins. Would have played with Paul in the national team, and underage, me and Paul are the same age. So I think we played in the national under 14, U14. So me and Paul know each other just coming up, and he was, I guess he was one of the best young players in Ireland. So everyone will kind of know who Paul was from my generation at least. So,
well, and I learned just to interrupt you right off the gate, I learned a fun fact about Paul. He was 5'11" at 15 years old. So I'd like to know, has he been pretty his whole life? I mean, there had to be at some point where, puberty, where his ears are bigger than his nose, or, something was disproportionate there, Could you give me the skinny on that? Because like everything this guy touched turns to gold. It's like Dr. Midas, the Midas touch. So
I was just talking to one of his friends.
I'm happy that we can not record this and you can give me all the dirt on this kid, because he was one of the biggest pleasures to coach at Lafayette. He was phenomenal. So, and Mark, he was humble. His freshman year, we go down to Louisville at Freedom Hall. That's the year they went. I think it was they had Garcia, that first round draft pick, I believe, Francisco Garcia.
Yeah.
Forget some of the other guys. It's funny, like all the games start to blend together. But I think it was 2005. Louisville had gone to the Final Four. And Cummings, fresh into his career, this Irishman, and obviously his reputation, carries with him, but obviously an adjustment to come to the States. He had come up through prep school and high school, as you know, but here in the States, but he drops, I think, 17, in one of his first experiences on the big time. Freedom Hall was packed. It was a guarantee game. So, he's too humble. I was going back through his podcast that you did with him. I mean, he talked more about, protection on filming kids. You guys had a 10-minute rant on forms you got to sign for the SDA, which is another great initiative he's done. But so I'd like to brag for him. Now, he's paying me a lot of money for this. So, again, we're in a pandemic, so I got to do whatever I can to keep things going here. But, but he was, our connection with Paul Cummings. I mean, it doesn't get any better than Paul. So, as you know, he was a pleasure to coach in college, but I'm sure we can talk about all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I was trying to dig up some dirt, and we had another podcast that Paul kind of hooked me up with his friend Casey, who was he's a player manager at Duke, so he had some like interactions with Coach K. So really interesting guy. He lived with Paul for 2 years because he stayed in his house at high school at Ravenscroft. And didn't have a bad word to say about it. I was like, this guy's got to have some skeletons in his closet.
It's all off, man. I mean, you Irishmen, you're no dummies.
He's just a good dude.
Survived every Saxon attack for any reason here. I mean, there's a reason Ireland, they got the rest of the island there. So you guys are no dummies. But I don't know who he's paying. How much he's paying Casey, but. Anybody that's been around Paul knows that, he's a good man.
I totally agree.
I'm glad he connected us.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I really appreciate you coming on. You've just had a baby, you were just telling us. So, I mean, it's extra special that you've taken the time out for me. So I really appreciate that. Okay, so let's go back to the start, as I always do. I did a little bit of research. So sometimes the research is right, sometimes it's wrong, but hopefully I got this right. So I think you're originally from Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. Is that?
Yep.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that. And is there a basketball kind of, is it a big place for basketball, or is it kind of a less big place for basketball, or how does that?
Yeah, actually we no, more of a football state, to be honest with you.
Okay. Interesting.
It's actually gotten bigger just with, the technology and YouTube and, just the massive amount of events and different, I mean, the game's global, as you know, which I think this initiative with your podcast, obviously you've had a bunch of folks from Ireland, but I'm sure you'll continue to expand it, and just a great initiative, by the way. But I'm curious to hear a little bit more about what inspired you to do the podcast, because I know you've had a pro career and have played at a high level. But in terms of where I'm from, Pennsylvania, South Central PA, I don't know how much you know about American football. Obviously that's a huge sport for us, over here, and it's almost like a religion, in and of itself. So where I grew up was just loaded for football. I mean, we had, I've half a dozen just out of my high school that played, major, high major football. And then of course you go into Western PA, which just, even 45 minutes, an hour west of me, you have the likes of Joe Montana and just some Hall of Famers. So more of a football state. As I said to you just a minute ago, it's growing, just because you really can't hide anymore. If there's talent, we'll find it, whether it's a college coach or in my case, a prep school coach, and obviously again, the YouTube has helped, but not really football, baseball. I think my senior year, which was 1998, there might have been 2 or 3 of us that went on to Division I. It's funny. It seems like a life ago, 22 years ago now, but I will say I was very fortunate because I played for a high school coach who's actually in the Pennsylvania Hall of Fame, Larry Kostelak, and he's like the program in Central PA. I mean, there's a few others. The city school, Harrisburg High, has a lot of talent, has had a lot of talent over the years, and a lot of those guys were former teammates of mine, in AAU and the club scene. But I was very fortunate that within a football environment and just an area of the country that was more geared towards other sports, I played in a great program in Trinity Catholic, the Shamrocks of all mascots. We were the Shamrocks. There you go. I have a son, Liam, by the way, Liam Andrews, 10 weeks old, who was born on March 17th, St. Patty's Day. And I went to Trinity Catholic, and our darn mascot is a Shamrock. So, if you and I can't get along, then it's your problem, But no, I was very fortunate. I played for just a private school that really took basketball seriously, and a lot of people would seek out that program if they wanted to be a hooper, and just a couple things went my way. Little shorter than you there, Mark. I was a 5'10" point guard, so I was fortunate on some pretty good off-season club. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the AAU scene. But off-season basketball is very important here in terms of recruiting. I was fortunate to play on some teams that had pulled kids from DC and Baltimore, which are about an hour and a half from where I grew up, in Philly. So between that and different camps during the summer, I got enough exposure that they came back out, my junior and senior year, and was able to parlay that into a Division I scholarship. So,
wow.
Long-winded answer there, Mark. But
no, it's interesting to hear the fact that it's a football state and there's not many guys come out of there, and that you said, like, one thing you said, that you took basketball seriously in the school, which is the more you hear about these kind of programs and people who play at a higher level, they came out of somewhere where there was a club, but maybe a pocket of a country that they took basketball seriously in that club, and they had a good coach in there, and he fostered that kind of the generations that came up, and you always get 1 or 2 guys then that come out of that. But they took it seriously, and they clearly, the reason they took it seriously is because they loved it and they wanted to develop the younger players.
Yeah, he was great. Again, he's a Hall of Famer in the state of PA.
Okay. Coach
Kaz, as we referred him to, and I just, in fact, I told you I went through some of your other podcasts because Jay Colleen is one of the best. I mean, I love visiting with Jay when I go over to Ireland. Jason, I think he was your first guest, and just a number of the guests you had, Blunt. In fact, I tried to recruit Blunt when I was he was coming up through. I believe that was one of my final years. When did he get done? In what year did he get
just finished this year?
Yeah, his freshman year, I think I was just finishing up maybe college. That might have been my last cycle at the University of Hartford. But anyway, you've had some cool guests, and as Paul alluded to, and some of the others talked about, it really is, it's that whole idea of nature versus nurture. I mean, you got to be talented in whatever you do. You got to have a baseline level of intellect, and, the industry you're moving through, or sports, you got to have, a baseline level of play, but from there, it is really the nurture. I mean, who you're around, who are the voices that you're listening to? Are those coaches putting you in a position to be successful? You're going to the right, developmental programs or events or exposure, things. So, a lot goes into it. In fact, that's Paul and I really enjoy talking about even what, the state of affairs in Ireland, and that, obviously right now we're all hamstrung because of the pandemic, but it's been neat just being involved with Irish basketball and obviously we share a lot of contacts, I'm sure, as we get going with this, but it's just neat to see some of the movement, and again, Paul Cummings and I talk about this all the time. And really, if you look at it, if you dig into it, it's things like the Sport Dream Academy that he launched, where it's that combination of, yes, exposure, and as he says, a shop window, but also really getting involved with these kids and nurturing their development at a younger age, and not just their development, but the coaches' development. And that's not to say American coaches are the end all. I mean, I make plenty of mistakes. I was going through game film just this year. We had a tough year. We had some season-ending injuries of a few starters, and it was just a difficult year after a great 2-year run the previous 2 seasons. And I'm looking at film saying, man, I wish I would have called a timeout there. I could have done that better. So that beginner's mindset, as you know, Mark, is in any industries, in anything you do. But the fundamental approach to really get to the kids younger, and whether it's a coach to coach program, whether it's just honing the skills of these kids. Because one thing that and I remember Paul talking to him, because again, I coached him at Lafayette before I moved on to the University of Hartford. We would have conversations just about the adjustment. And when you're dealing with 350 million people, give or take, I'm not sure the exact, obviously our population continues to grow, but there's just a bigger pool, and that's going to be conducive to more athleticism. We have a very diverse, population. So, one of the things that I always talk about when I go over to Ireland, whether it's a Sport Dream Academy or Basketball Ireland in general, is that, you don't necessarily have to specialize as a 12-year-old, because I do think sports in general is good for the soul. It's good for a kid's transferable skills, just being in different sports, different, obviously, modalities and different things. But, if you're going to really expect to play at a high level in basketball, then you got to treat it a little bit higher level earlier, and I think that's what you're passionate about. I mean, one of the things that I hear, that you're on a crusade to do is, even through this podcast, is kind of, make this, interconnected, where people can feed off each other to make basketball in Ireland better. That's what I'm assuming. So
yeah, and you've picked up on that. I mean, it's kind of it's just something I noticed having left, seen a higher level, seen how it's been done in a few other countries, and what they're trying to do. Maybe even in Germany with the younger players that I was seeing there, that were watching the professionals and seeing them, the way they practiced and the way they trained, and even in the games, the intensity which they played at, you could see that those younger kids were the kind of the eagerness then to go and try and learn and get better was almost stronger, because they were watching a very elite level of basketball. So it kind of pushed them on to go to the gym at 16, 17. And when I came back to Ireland, I thought there's some of that missing, there's some of that missing, and maybe just even having people on talking about it might just, inform people more, or just inspire a coach to go and find out more about, X or Y, listening to other coaches or listening to other players talk. So that was the idea, just to kind of get the conversation going, just because, I mean, you might listen to something and then go away and look something up based on that. So it was just to kind of get a conversation, discussion going about it. You just don't know where it could lead somebody. And I think conversation is a good place to start. You can never, you can talk too much, but I think communication is a big part of it, and knowledge and education. So once that's in place, I think that's a good place to start, the education side of it. So I don't want to say it's an education podcast. I'm just here today because I like the stories, but I think also it will inform players and coaches, hopefully, as to some of the things that are happening outside of Ireland. It's something that I learned in business, actually, is this: if you're looking internally all the time in your own bubble, it's very hard to see what you're missing, maybe. So if you get some outside information, hopefully you can grow a bit more. That's the kind of.
Well, it's funny. Obviously I totally agree with that, and I'll even take it one step further. There's a dilemma that a lot of coaches are going through. And obviously social media helps all of us to see what these dilemmas are. And you'll see a coach rant about kids these days and different things like that. And I don't want to sound like it's the end all, but I just have a hard time, at 40 years old and with some experiences under my belt, just, of course just inherently relate to your upbringing or your generation, or there's always going to be that, well, when I was your age, I walked 6 miles in the snow to school,
Yeah.
the gym or whatever. So there's always going to be some of that, and that's the fabric of relationships and who we are across generations. But in general, I think people are people. And I think one of the things what people are really saying about kids these days are more, I think, is more in tune with, there's just so much information that these kids have access to.
Yeah.
And there's just so much ability for kids now to cross-pollinate information. They can go from one YouTube. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I'm not saying that kids shouldn't go to college. I'm not saying that university degrees aren't worth it. But when you start talking about $70,000, at least in the States, for a higher ed, for just a Bachelor of Arts or Science degree, when you could literally take a look at the syllabus across 4 years and probably find every course online, whether it's a YouTube video or edX or whatever. And again, I'm not promoting people don't push themselves in a traditional sense in terms of academia, but the bottom line is that's information. It's information flow. It's just it's access to that, and kids are no different. In fact, kids are, they're coming out of the womb. I mean, I look at Liam, again, my 10-week-old, and I'm, of course, it's hyper right now because the only thing we can do is through the screens and communicate through the screens and Zoom. But he's staring at the screen, and he's engaged with his grandmas, and his uncles and aunts. So the point is not to go on a tangent with that, but I think more the dilemma about these kids these days is recognizing that you don't want to get into a back and forth every practice. You don't want to, if you're always explaining the why, if it's always a rebuttal, if it's always back and forth, it's going to sacrifice the time you have to get better, obviously individually if it's a player development session with that kid, but then more collectively as a squad, as a team, right? But you have to be prepared that kids now have a broader template to approach their craft, to approach basketball with. And in turn, again, and this might sound heavier than it needs to be, but I just think that this exposure can be looked at one way or another. It can be looked at a very positive thing, that kids see what it's like to be LeBron James in the States. They see what it's like to have a former pro do a podcast. They see what it's like to have, a former athlete now turn an executive in the business world and is killing it, in corporate America or corporate Ireland or whatever. Just, it's a global economy, obviously. So, I just think that the exposure, things that you're doing, just to piggyback what you said about the mission of what you're doing, I think it's great. I think in fact, I think the kids in Ireland right now, that's what they need. I mean, again, talking to Colleen and Cummings, and we all worked these camps together in Ireland, specifically the Sport Dream Academy. We talk at night when the kids go down, and we're just regrouped for the next day. We're unwinding for the next day. It depends how you look at it, because it'll drive them nuts. But is that they need this exposure. They need podcasts that they can listen to. They need to see the YouTube videos of, why do you think in general across the world economies are getting better, poverty's going down? It's as much crap as we have going on in the world. It's just we're the safest global civilization we've ever been. It's because people were teaching girls how to read in sub-Saharan Africa. So the bottom line is that's all points towards information. So I think as long as we continue to channel and deliver that information as coaches appropriately, it's a great tool for people like yourself that's trying to build a game in a country that otherwise doesn't make basketball a priority.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And it is, for want of a better term, a minority sport here. So like you'll still have Irish football, rugby. They're probably two of the big ones. So basketball is never going to maybe receive the funding that we would love to have, or even the athletes, in terms of we would lose athletes to other sports. But for those clubs where they do have basketball in those pockets in Ireland, it's just to have when you want to go on and listen to something related to basketball. I know when I grew up, if they had a bit of podcast about basketball, I would have been listening to it for sure. Listening to guys who would play the national team and heard their story, I would have been all over it. So I just thought there's nothing that exists. So, get it started and then just try and expose them to some more basketball related stuff. I would have enjoyed it. So I just thought about it that way.
It's amazing. And you're from Longford, by the way, right? Is that?
Yeah, Longford. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah,
That's
trust me. One thing you'll learn about me is if you hang around me long enough, and I hope we get a chance in person to hang at some point through the different initiatives and contacts we share. But I'm the worst with pronouncing names. I'm that's and my buddies and colleagues don't let me live it down. But anyway, I'd love to get the Sligo, by the way. That's what I was going
oh,
to ask.
Sligo. Yeah, Sligo's gorgeous. Yeah.
That's on the Dublin Sligo County line, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, yeah. It's like,
Yes.
well, it's been sadly bypassed now. But the club I'm from, I probably haven't mentioned on the podcast, and my coach is probably from back in the days probably going, why has he not mentioned it? So, but I'll mention it now. Longford Falcons was the name of the club.
Okay. Yep.
And the coach was Mick Murphy.
Okay.
And he was a fantastic coach. He just put all his effort into the kids, and we won a bunch of national medals with him. That like just unprecedented for Longford because it's just such a small town. So we had, similar to yourself, had a coach who was just really passionate about it and pushed a lot of the kids and took it seriously. And so it was a great.
Well, promise me if I get over there, I can come to your neck of the woods. I've had an opportunity the last couple of years. I've come to Ireland to work camps and do different things with Basketball Ireland. And obviously Paul, I've had a chance to take a few days and just explore. I mean, I just, I have, again, in the States, we're obsessed with our heritage, and I do have a heavy amount of Irish background. And so I have some family, through the ancestry that we've looked up in the Sligo area and then County Mayo, and then down through Galway. So I went to Westport last year, which you would have died. I was driving across, and I said, how long? I decided to rent a car. And I had taken, public transportation some, years prior. But I said, you know what? I'm coming over here year after year. I'm going to rent a car, And so I rent a car. I get the super coverage or whatever. And, of course, it's different, the lanes. Paul Cummings says, who's my host, says, no problem. It'll take you 5 minutes. Just pay attention, blah, blah, blah. You would have been dying if you were a fly on the wall in my car, because it took me, they said, it'll take a few hours to get across the country, to Westport from Dublin. It might have taken me 6 hours to get there, because every time another car came on those back roads, I stopped like I was, a 9-year-old grandmother who couldn't see the road, because it was just nerve wracking. And you can tell, if you're from there and you're used to driving, I mean, these tractor trailers just barreling down this with maybe 2 inches, 3 inches between the road and those stone walls. And so, it was like the Dumb and Dumber movie. Have you ever seen Dumb and Dumber?
I've seen Dumb and Dumber.
When they're trying to find their way to the ski lodge, whatever, and he says, that John Denver's full of shit, man. That's how I felt. Like 2 hours, 2 hours my arse to get across to Westport. So, but beautiful. That part of the country was beautiful, man. Westport's
gorgeous, and Sligo is beautiful. I mean, that whole West Coast, Galway, Mayo, Sligo, and actually, just because I've been away for so long as well, I would often pine. As soon as I come back, I'd want to go to the West Coast because it's just breathtaking. The whole landscape over there.
Galway was cool. That was eclectic town. That was
it's kind of
live music and just a scene and the Atlantic, what they call it, the Wild Atlantic Way, which crosses everywhere around Ireland. But just beautiful. Been very fortunate to use basketball in a lot of different ways, to have a lot of different experiences. So, and I've really enjoyed my experience coaching in Ireland the last few years, specifically with Paul and the different initiatives, that even like yourself, you're trying to just push the game there, and it's just not a shabby country to go visit and coach. I'll tell you that.
No, it's a great place to come to go coach. I'd say a lot of coaches probably want to come over to Ireland and do some coaching, if they get the opportunity. I'm just going to get back to because I just got a bunch of discussion points, but that was really cool just to hear about your experience in Ireland. So after your playing days, you kind of went back to that, and then it looked like, just from what I was reading, you almost immediately kind of went into the coaching, and was it at Lafayette then?
I didn't know. Actually, it was as a graduate assistant, which is a pretty typical route. I had fought. I was a role player in college. Probably would have been, in terms of having a, 30, 40-minute a game guy and better stats or more stats, probably was more suited to play high D3 or D2. But I always dreamed about playing Division I and being a part of, an NCAA tournament team and really pushing the envelope there. So had an opportunity, like I said, through just, some things falling my way when I was a teenager and some of these teams I played on. And obviously the high school I'd mentioned, although we weren't in a basketball area, we were sort of a go-to program. So we, even against some of these Philly teams, we had gone pretty far advanced in the state tournament, which obviously brought recognition and exposure. So I had the opportunity to go Division I, and but very much a role player, So the reason I say that is because I also wanted to play pro, but I didn't realize at the time that there were many ways, and this is one of the things I tell the kids all the time, is there's so many ways to be in this game. That's going back to the rant that I gave you about just the world is flat and access to information and just different ways to be in the game. It's just so many ways to do it. But at 22, 23 years old, coming out of college, I wasn't aware of that. There's some coaches that put it in my ear that, hey, think about this or that. Playing for peace was one of the things that was put in front of me, in Northern Ireland.
Oh,
but
yeah,
again,
yeah.
I was, I'm 40 now, but 7 to 18 years ago, it just, you have a different set of priorities, or maybe you're not looking at something the right way. So I passed up on some opportunities to go play pro in countries like Ireland, like Belgium, like England, that weren't as prominent as the Germanys, Italy, Spain, etc. That's maybe one of my, I think people are full of themselves when they say no regrets. We try to live as best we can by no regrets, but human nature, human conditions, we look back and would have done things differently. That's one of the things I regret, is that not using the game immediately, after school to go
and play,
see the world. Yeah, exactly. So, which is later on in my story, that's why I got involved with global sports, and that's why I'm heavily involved with international basketball, because of, I think, some of that, that just has always carried with me, that, guys like yourself who have used the game to be a pro, go to different countries. So I skipped that, always caught the coaching bug, always knew I wanted to be around the game, whether it's just the team aspect of being a part of a team sport. Obviously, you and Paul talked for a few minutes about the transferable aspect, and attributes of sports. I think that's an awesome thing, to be a part of. I think that's, and when it's applied the right way, it's a noble thing in getting kids to the next, phase of their life. I think a lot of kids, and not just kids, I think even pros, we're so myopic, certainly pros, we're so myopic in being the best we can be at the sport we play. And this is agnostic. Whatever sport you're playing, that, I think you can, even the smartest of people can forget, how to truly apply those transferable attributes, and those transferable skills. So I think that should always be baked into coaching, so it was interesting to hear about that. And that's where, getting kids, if they go play pro, if they do certain things, to understand that along the way, that experience, that you're just, it's a non-zero sum game here. You're just collecting experience. So for me, although I regretted not playing, going pro immediately after college, I had the opportunity, just that bug and what coaching meant to me, and what I thought it was and what it should be, led me to a Division II program where I picked up, a master's in, sport management, and still keep in contact with, had some wonderful professors there, met some great people there, lifelong colleagues and friends. And they're actually, Jeff Wilson, who's the coach at Stroudsburg University, is building national we weren't at the time, we were rebuilding, but since I left and moved on, this is 2004, for heaven's sakes, but he's built a national program. He's a great coach. Learned a lot from him, and then I parlayed that into going back to my alma mater, and coaching under Fran O'Hanlon, who I played for in college, as you know. But I had an opportunity to go back to Lafayette as the first former. I feel very, appreciative of this, but the first former player of his to join his staff, at the Division I level. So I did that at 24.
24.
Yeah,
so you're on the staff at 24.
Well, that in a quarter might get you a cup of coffee now, but But I feel very fortunate in my career, you know, and you know how it is. I mean, you just navigate, you know, you have an interest, you have a passion. Sometimes that changes. I mean, inevitably as you have life experiences, your interests are going to grow and shrink, and hopefully you stay in the silo of what you're ultimately passionate about and you figure it out. And I've been very fortunate. You know, I was telling my wife the other day, you know, because obviously the walls are talking to us with this pandemic and all the concerns around COVID, and very much like you, we're hunkered down, as I said earlier in the podcast. But so it has you thinking probably more than you should. And, you know, I try to just be very grateful and appreciative for what the game has brought to my life. I mean, it's, you know, I've coached at different levels. I've had different experiences, you know, personal and professional, but that would be the only thing is I wish I would. And I tell the kids I coach now, like, if you can use the game to play as long as you can, because you know how it is, Mark, when you're 24, you think you're 30. You know, your responsibilities, you know, if you have any ambition or any sense of, you know, dignity and accountability, you're pushing, you're thinking about the next fold of, you know, things you want to do and responsibilities. And I tell the kids, like, if you can use the game and go see the world, I don't care if you're just making enough to live in an apartment, because you obviously know, being a former pro or pro yourself, different ways to do that. You know, obviously certain countries, I mean, certainly Ireland, England, I know Paul and some of the guys we at Lafayette actually worked on master's degrees while they were pros, you know, and just finding, so even podcasts like this, just giving kids access to different ways to do it that I didn't have when I was coming out. You know, I was fortunate to be able to land a Division II GA that, you know, gave way to a Division I job early in my career. But yeah, I've had a great experience. I went to East Stroudsburg, and then I found myself after 1 year back in my alma mater, and we had just gotten scholarships. I don't know if you're familiar with the Patriot League. At that time, it was just, it's a mid-major, it's a bona fide mid-major scholarship league now. It's a great league in terms of combination of academics and athletic and sports. But at the time, basketball was just the league, the Patriot League, did not mandate that the conference implement scholarships, you know. So instead of the whole league going scholarship at one time, they let it up to each, as I understand it, you know, and obviously I was in the league, I was at Lafayette. Each institution decided when it was appropriate, when they felt the need to implement athletic scholarships, and specifically basketball scholarships. So at 25, after 2 years as the restricted earnings or third assistant, you know, basically what helped pay my bills was I was what's called a residence director in a fraternity. I was directing, I was in charge of these kids that I was only a few years older, you know, and you know, I don't know if you know fraternities and
yeah, I just know it from watching like old school, you know, like
Animal House. In fact, they were Deke, and I think if I'm not mistaken, the Animal House, the movie Animal House, which is a great movie, was after that fraternity, I believe so. Don't quote me on it. I you know, it's like you caught a fish this big. You know, the story in my mind, that's the fraternity. But, you know, but that was crazy. And then I found myself at 25 after 2 years of being a coach / you know, res life advisor in a full-time position under Fran O'Hanlon as we were getting scholarships. So that was a really interesting, you know, professional experience, because I was the youngest, from what I've been told, the youngest head assistant in the country at the Division I level, and then on top of that, getting scholarships.
So this is now, like, just clarify that bit. Is you basically the full ride scholarship versus maybe just recruiting players and not being able to give them that full ride, which would be like accommodation and tuition fees and all that kind of stuff.
So you know, if, for those listening or your audience who, you know, might not quite understand the American system here, and with basketball, you have two fundamentally different models. Okay, you have scholarship model and you have a financial aid model. So in the Division I, and I know you know this, but just for your listeners, for Division I, Division II, and AIA, you know, some of the other leagues that are a part of college athletics, you can give full rides. You know, you can give a full financial financial ride, scholarship based on basketball. Okay. And then as you move out of Division I, like Division II, what they'll do is it's called stacking. So they might give a half scholarship, athletic scholarship for basketball, but then they'll also read the financial aid, and they may stack. So they give a half, but then they'll stack financial aid on that. There's other merit-based, academics. There's different packaging that you can do as you move down. Division III is a much different model. I wouldn't say cleaner, because it's not like Division II isn't doing something they can. It's a little more black and white from the standpoint. In Division III, what they'll do is they'll look at your parents' finances, or your guardians or your support system, legal guardians, and they'll say, how much financial aid do you need based on the household income. So that it's not totally attached to athletics. Although you're going there and you've been recruited to play basketball, it's more of a holistic approach. And what the philosophy there is that, although there's great academic institutions at Division I level, Division III as a whole says, hey, we really want to make sure philosophically we never look like we're skewing towards sports, even though sports is very important on college campuses. So we're going to give you aid based on, financially what you need as a household. Now, there's some Division IIIs as you go down in tiers, as you go down and it's a little less academic or prominent, they will throw in merit or academic aid to a really good student who would otherwise go to a top, Division III school academically. So, but Division I is so we went from a Division III model, basically financial aid in the Patriot League. I think they were the Ivy League's the last one that still does financial aid at the Division I level, but we were the second to last in the Patriot League. And I found myself at going on 26 now, being handed as the head assistant and recruiting coordinator these first 3 scholarships. We had implemented the scholarships a year before, but it was so late that it wasn't really a robust recruiting class. In fact, I don't think any of them stayed at Lafayette. It was just we tried to do it quickly. But then the next year was like the full cycle where we had the scholarships and could really actively go out and recruit for a whole recruiting cycle and off season. And that was a great experience, man. Yeah. I learned so much. I mean, not to be on a tangent about this, but I'm assuming
it's interesting. Yeah.
Hopefully what you want to talk about. It's always interesting to talk about yourself, that, but, but I do appreciate the opportunity to share my story. And that was a great experience. I mean, I learned a lot about recruiting, the ins and outs of recruiting. And all of a sudden you find yourself, when you were just financial aid based, especially at the D1 level, you had to wait to see who fell through the cracks. So when you're financial aid based, you'll throw a huge net out because you don't have the carrot of here's a full basketball scholarship, and especially if a kid comes from a pretty affluent background. Now, what do you really have? I mean, hopefully you have a good product in your college, university, your academics, and then your basketball program. But it's just a different narrative, and you got to kind of let the timeline, let that play out a certain way, because you really don't have that leverage of a full $250,000 scholarship, $250,000 over 4 years. When we went to full rides at Lafayette, and we're trying to play catch up, and see, that's the thing people don't understand is that anybody that's followed Lafayette basketball. The history of Lafayette basketball, Coach O'Hanlon, who's like a second dad to me. I mean, again, he was the first one that hired me at the Division I level, brought me back as his first former player. Feel extremely grateful to have learned so much under Fran O'Hanlon. But what a lot of people fail to realize is that Coach O'Hanlon dominated that league as a non-scholarship league, financial aid based. He won it 2 years in a row. I was fortunate to be a part, again, role player, but I was a part of the 2000 team. But he had won it a couple years in a row, right? And being a hooper yourself, to win consecutive championships is at any level is very difficult. But then right around 2000, 2001, the whole league was kind of had already made the transition to implementing full scholarships. So now it wasn't financial aid based; it was full here's a basketball scholarship, right? So naturally we fell behind. We used to say, like Coach O'Hanlon used to try to make us feel better if we lost to one of our, schools in the league, a rival school, or what have you. If we lost out on a recruit, he would say, like, well, you don't have a $200,000 personality. I'm sorry. Basically saying, like, you did a great job, but they're only getting 20 grand in financial aid because the family does pretty well. Yeah, they're a heck of a basketball player, but we don't have any instrument. We don't have a tool right now to give them. So we fell naturally behind.
Gotcha.
And it took a long time, as with look at the Sixers. And now Sixers, I'm from PA, and I'm not a huge Sixers fan, to be honest. I'm sort of a convert living in New England now. I'm probably more of a Boston fan. I don't want any of my family back in PA to know that, but although I still hang on to the Steelers, Pittsburgh Steelers, which is obviously another PA team. But it takes a long time. Like, you look at the Sixers, it took years for them. Now, again, the pros is a whole different animal with contracts and but the philosophy was the same, is that we build it up, it got broken down, and we had to build it up again, and then we were fortunate enough. I left for an opportunity, which I could not pass up, to go up as the associate coach under Dan Leibovitz, who was John Chaney's longtime head assistant at the University of Hartford, which is where I met my wife at the University of Hartford. I've since been in Connecticut. But when I went up to Hartford, the groups that we were able to put together, ended up, scholarship groups, ended up going to 3 title games, Patriot League tournament championship games in a row. And unfortunately, it was like the Buffalo Bills. They never got to the NCAA tournament. But just that was nice to see, like, okay, we got scholarships. Now we're competing again in the league,
Right.
And I believe it was 3. It was 2 or 3. But, and then he's had plenty of success. He's the all-time winningest coach, if I'm not mistaken. Fran O'Hanlon is in the page. He's been there. I mean, how many coaches, if you look at his background, get a chance to stay at one division? He'd be a great guy to talk to, by the way. Fran O'Hanlon. And obviously O'Hanlon would fit your audience,
So it sounds Irish. There's a lot of Irish connections there. And there.
In fact, he's introduced me to a lot of different Irish people. He was kind of the first one that got me to think about everything we're talking about, using the game, Fran O'Hanlon, when I was a restricted earnings coach, I was 25 years old.
That's crazy.
This is right before all that stuff. So I was 26. Everything I told you, I had turned 26. So the year before, when I was a restricted earnings guy and I was doing that residence director position to help supplement my, peanut, the coaching salary. And you know the industry. You get in because you love the game, and then you hope things work out, and you make different things work to financially move your life forward, which is obviously what I've had to do, and I've enjoyed that as well. But when I was 25 years old, I remember going into his office and starting to talk to him about, like, hey, do you think maybe I can go coach overseas in a clinic or a camp, and you're nervous as a young assistant because because it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's like all hands on deck all the time. He was the best because he's one of the best players all time in Sweden. He was a Hall of Famer at Villanova, had a stint with the Sixers, by the way, and played for the Floridians, and went overseas, had an awesome career overseas, back when they didn't have crossovers and their shorts were like wearing underwear.
He
was a great player. He was a great player. Much better than
I looked him up today, actually, and I didn't realize the history he had in the game. He's been a great mentor of mine. But he said, no problem, go over. He let me backpack. Now, this is a Division I assistant coach. All right, maybe this is why I'm a prep school coach now. Who knows? Just in terms of integrating your life a little bit differently. He let me backpack in Europe for 5 weeks. 5 weeks. I was, restricted earnings. They had changed it because there was actually a class action suit that the NCAA, I don't remember that date, but we still coined it sort of the restricted earnings. Basically, you're the third assistant. You're the low man on totem pole. And again, before I ended up moving up, but I look back on that. I'm like, how many Division I, the rat race that this industry is, coaching, and it's everywhere now. I mean, FIBA is even worse, hired to be fired. And I mean, this. And he let me go, and I worked. So what I did is I would pick cities in Europe,
and more so where the connections were at the time. And that was Western Europe and specifically Belgium and England, and I would travel and then land at a clinic or land and do a camp, and then I would travel. I did this for like 5 weeks and saw all these different countries, and like I was a kid that was doing a gap year, after college, and going west or going to travel, So he'd be a great guy. Obviously, very much on a tangent with that, but he'd be a great guy to talk to, Coach O'Hanlon.
It sounds interesting. All right. I mean, he was there for 25 years. I think I read as well.
He's
been there for,
and you can always argue, people are so, this, Mark, and just even talking to Paul a little bit about you, just in the fact you're doing this podcast, trying to create some scope and a broader narrative around the game. People just get so short. So you got to pay your bills. You got to keep your contract. You got to show progress. You got to show results. But for heaven's sakes, when you pick coaching, it's not the Wolf of Wall Street. You have to have a killer mentality. You have to make sure you're winning. I get it. I've been exposed enough to the highest levels of athletics and basketball to understand that narrative, right? Which is why I've tried to set up a life where, yes, I'm aggressive professionally, but I'm also trying to be integrated and trying to be a little more balanced in what I do. Because at the end of the day, you're working with kids. You're working with 18 to 22-year-olds. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things, obviously, Coach O'Hanlon has been able to renew his contract. Obviously, he's been able to win at a Division I level. Again, there's not many guys that will stay at one Division I school and program for as long as he has. I think he's been you looked it up today, 4 NCAA tournaments, 3 or 4. At one point, if you went to Lafayette, if you went to Lafayette in 4 years, you would get to a title game and hopefully the NCAA tournament. So not too bad.
Pretty impressive, yeah.
But what I was going to say to you is he taught you a lot more than just basketball, whether it was his experiences in Europe using the game, to see the world, just different things that, quotes he would say, things, he's like Paul, and I have a great story for you about Paul's piano playing. But, Franny plays guitar, so anyway, Coach O'Hanlon would be a good one to reach out to, and I'd be happy to connect you to him.
That'd be great. That'd be fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to get his story. Okay, well that's really interesting. It was interesting to hear about the recruiting part. And at 25, you must have picked up a lot there, and just even then, just the kind of skills you'd learned for going on as a coach then, and you've obviously transitioned to prep school, so you can now see both sides of it. You probably hearing all the stories from the Division I coaches that are coaching or that are looking for these kids that are coming from prep school. So you've kind of seen that angle, and now you're able to kind of flip over, and you're working with younger kids now who are about to take that step. You kind of know what they're looking for almost, having done the recruiting side of it.
Yep. Well, and that's, again, as I just said, you're ambitious. I'm ambitious. We're young. I like to think we're young guys. I think you're a few years younger, but I feel like I have a lot of years ahead of me in my career. So, never want to paint the picture, and people that know me know it's not true. Like, I want to keep pushing. Yeah. But one of the things that I started to realize probably around 2013 was, how do I want to push? And, I think you have a great responsibility. In fact, Michael Lewis, I forget, Outside the Rules, or you a Michael Lewis fan, Moneyball?
Yeah, Moneyball, yeah.
Yeah, Moneyball is great. And, he's made a bunch of movies. Moneyball is awesome. The movie was great. And, he's now looking at season 2 at his, and I don't quote me on the title of it, but someone had recommended to me just the other day, but he's looking at coaching, the importance of coaching, what coaching means, and not just sports coaching, but just coaching in general, business coaching, life coaching. Obviously he talks about sports coaching. In fact, he starts out with how coaching really grew out of the seed of, sports and teams and athletics. So really curious to dive into that. But 2013, after having a number of early career experiences a lot of guys don't have, at a decent level, Division I, I just started looking at, how do I want to push? How do I want to be in the game? And obviously at the core of it has always been coaching and working with young people and using the game, as a platform to to make them better players and have good teams, successful teams, but also really activate what that experience is for the next 40 years, and when you're a Division I college coach, if you're in it at any level, but certainly Division I, you realize like it is at that level a specific set of things. It's a very narrow job description as a Division I assistant, associate coach. I mean, yeah, you're always working on your craft. You're trying to broaden your horizon. Whether it's spirituality, whether it's just thinking the game, and there's a million ways to work on your craft, right? But at the end of the day, the black and white of it is it's a pretty narrow job description. Recruit, retain, develop, and a lot of it retaining is a huge thing now because you're seeing. I mean, look at the portal, the
transfers,
transfers, and now the Division III mark. I mean, when I got out of it in 2013 and moved on, and started doing things overseas, and then ultimately landed at Choate, there was no recruiting. You maybe a kid once in a blue moon would go from D3 to D1. I mean, Duncan is the ultimate. And he actually was in my prep league at Exeter. I wasn't at Choate yet, but Exeter,
Timmy D.
Yeah, Duncan played in my conference. Again, I was not at Choate at the time.
Right.
But Jay Tilton's a good friend of mine, excellent coach. Another guy that you'd love to talk to, Jay Tilton at Exeter. But he's had a journeyman experience too. He's been at prep school, I think almost 15 years. Again, you can look all this up, but he's another wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure he could tell you some great stories and drop you a lot of different names. He's the gold standard of prep school, in terms of the balance of academics and athletics and basketball, So we have him sort of pinned against the wall. That's the team we're trying to beat.
All right, okay.
But outside of Duncan, a few other, you didn't really have. Now it's like it's an onslaught of kids that are getting poached from Division III. They play a year or two Division III, and then they get in the portal and they want to recruit. They want to transfer up.
I wonder why that is. That's kind of evolved. Is it to do with like the teams? Because you see some of the college teams now, they're almost loading up the star players, or is that kind of how it's working, or why is that evolved to the point where there's all these transfers? You do see that a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you always had transfers, but now it's just very transparent in how transfers are looked at, and how, again, talk about information. I mean, all this really stems to information, and so I think now it's very open. The NCAA has kind of leaned into it. It's like, can't beat them, join them. They realize transfer is going to be a part of the game. It's an industry. I mean, the NCAA is, I believe, somewhere up towards $13 billion industry, so, again, all this can be fact checked and looked up, and whether it's off a few percentage points here or there, the concept holds true that it's a business. And at the Division I level, especially, and to me, it's just, how do you want to do it? And in 2013, at 33 years old, there was just a little more integrated way I wanted to do it. And that was conducive to getting more involved with a broader experience around basketball overseas, but then specifically coming back down a level of prep school. Obviously, it's a very good prep school. It's a nationally recognized school. So I still get my juices there in terms of recruiting and coaching at a high level. But now I got the kids on this side of it. And now it's like you can kind of hopefully, holistically give them a little bit. Yeah, you want to be great, you're going to have to be myopic. If you want to be, anybody, it's like jack of all trades, master of none. I think there's a little more room to be a generalist in the 21st century with a world that's very flat and really no careers grounded anymore and can't be exported. I mean, we're seeing that even, in a lot of ways acutely through this pandemic. I never thought I'd be stuck at home without the ability to get a ball and go visit a rim and get kids in the gym and work on someone's game or work on hoops, right? So it's an interesting time to think about all this stuff. And I think that, in the prep school, what you have is a really cool opportunity, especially if you've coached at the higher level, where it is really, you do see the raw side of that and the business side of that and the contractual, higher contractual side, that, these kids, you have to try to broaden the horizons, not so much where they lose interest or try to do too many things at once, but just where they're harnessing the information that we're talking about correctly, and they're cross-pollinating the information correctly. You know, like, I'll give you an example. So I have a young man who is a very talented artist. Like, he's saying when he was growing up, he comes from a highly educated family. They always push being, multi-dimensional, not just putting all your eggs in one basket. But he's also a very good basketball player. He's going to have a chance to play at a pretty good level in college. Not Ivy, definitely, NESCAC level, reputable level. But he's seeing a lot of these athletes turn entrepreneurs, athletes turn artists, and he's really leaning into his art right now. Okay, and in some ways, it could be perceived at the expense of his basketball experience. So what do you do with a kid like that? Do you tell a kid, don't sing, don't get on GarageBand and mix beats, don't get on? I'm right across 5 feet from here. I have a Yamaha acoustic. I'm like the 3-chord wonder. I can only play like the same damn 5 songs over and over again, but I enjoy it, And so what do you tell? So that's my point. Like, that kid has seen different, profiles. He's seen different people through the internet, through social media, taking a run at art and music as an athlete. And it's really coaching them to understand that, okay, you only have so many hours a day, there's so much RAM you have. What are your priorities? And I think, to be honest with you, and I'm biased, and this might sound a little, in some ways arrogant, but I say it in a very humble way. Like, I think coaching is more important now than it ever has been, because really coaching is trying to get people to understand their situation, right? And develop a successful repertoire to be successful in that situation, right? That's really what coaching is, whether it's basketball. And now the canvas that we're trying to help these kids, navigate and control and ultimately succeed at is just getting broader and more, there's more depth to it. I mean, it's like the old saying, who are the better guitar players? The guitar players in the 60s, speaking music, that had to sit there and slow down the track where they could finally hear the chords and hear the notes, or the person that can get on Ultimate Guitar or Chordify and has all the chords right there. It's a chicken or the egg, right? And I think there's a place, as information is flooding these kids, because what's the downside of that, Mark? And you know this because you're in the game. Instant gratification, not understanding a really important life skill, and that's in delayed gratification. It's like, if the kids don't hear what they want to hear, I call it the earbud generation, in terms of busting chops on different generations. They put their earbuds if they don't want to hear. Well, if they continue to do that and create an escape to a different identity online or what have you, that at some point is going to come back to haunt them. So even with this young man that I have, instead of saying, you can't do basketball, or I'm sorry, you want to do basketball, so you can't do art right now, at this point in your life, or you put down the microphone, or stop, mixing your beats, or get off GarageBand. Instead, it's, okay, how are we going to balance this, integrate it, where, yes, you're not becoming too much of a generalist too early in your basketball career, but you're also building out the transferable nature of this, because the same qualities that are probably making you successful in art and music right now at 2 a.m. are why you're shooting 91% from the free throw line.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I think it's always good to encourage people to stay around it and pursue other things. And a lot of times when people, you see some of the guys who are very good at doing one thing, they'll be multi-talented and they'll be just really good at doing something else, and they'll have 2 choices. Like, they could have been like a professional singer and could have been a professional player. So it's definitely one of those things, pursue to the point at which you then have to make a decision. If you have a professional decision then to go, or a college, if you're going to go to college and play basketball, you probably won't have that much time to do it. You can still do it on the side, but definitely don't give it up, or don't say don't play it anymore, I suppose, is the key, because it's probably an outlet for them.
Right. I agree.
Just haven't played a bit of music myself. Yeah. It's definitely one of those ones. I think as I've certainly gotten older, I've realized that, the best way to help younger people is to try and encourage them to keep on everything as long as possible and keep doing as much as they can to grow, because you don't know where it's going to take them, like you said, the same way with sports or
Look at
music?
what you're doing now. I mean, what inspired, and I said it earlier in the podcast, what inspired you? I mean, I was reading a little bit about your background. You obviously had a good career. You were in Scotland, right? You used the game to go, were you in Aberdeen? Is that what is
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So I played over in Scotland and Aberdeen, and we
Yeah.
kind of
Won
we
a
were
championship, right? Then you have, it had been a long time since they had,
yeah, we won a British championship over there, which we'd probably never done before. We played for the Scottish Universities team, and we beat England for the first time in like 30 years. And we had some pretty good players that year. So, yeah, just after that, one of the coaches said to me, think you could probably play at a higher level if you tried to. So then I went to like an exposure camp, and kind of that's how I ended up getting a chance to play pro. I got 2 offers, kind of played really well. We got to the final of this tournament, and that's where I got my offer. So I kind of just went and did it myself, but I was very late, like
are
developing.
you retired now? Sorry that I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's all right. No, so I'm still active, but like, just playing for in the Irish Super League, basically.
Right.
So we actually got to the National Cup final last year, which was really good. We didn't
Oh,
win. We lost to Paul's team, with his ex team.
oh, yeah,
Temple Oak, yeah, Temple Oak, and he's the Mark Keenan is the coach there, and he's the national team coach as well. So he's the experienced.
I've had a chance to meet Mark. He's a good guy, and then, of course,
Really nice
Puff Summers, Puff.
Yeah, Puff Summers, yeah. So he was playing. He was playing in the cup final against us last year. He's a good player too. So they're
he loves it.
Nice bunch of guys, actually. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're great. There's a great group of you guys over there, just trying to move the game. And like I said, Puff's an absolute hoops junkie, and
yeah, he loves it. Yeah.
Paul just, Paul has done some great things with that Sport Dream Academy. I keep telling Paul, he's, as you know, he's a really bright guy, and he's talk about multidimensional. Just everything we're talking about conceptually with using the game and transferable attributes. I mean, he epitomizes that. And just. We say, I'm sure you've heard the quote about too much is given, much is asked. And Paul, sort of walks that walk. Here's a guy that managing director of a corporation, small enterprise in Ireland, has done really well. Sea Change, as you probably know, and really interesting to see even what they're doing in light of, COVID. I was just talking to him a little bit and going through his site the other day. But then on top of that, he continues to allocate time for that. What is it? Developmental Academy, which I think is a great initiative, Mark, in terms of getting these kids younger and like coaching the coach and getting, just really introducing these kids to the rigors of if you want to be good. Because don't get me wrong, I don't want to confuse your listeners. Like if you want to be good at something, there has to be a level of heightened commitment and a myopic nature to it. I just think inevitably, if you're not thinking as a coach about the broader picture, especially at the level I coach, just to set the tone for, hey, this will end, and how are you going to activate your ingenuity? Because players, good athletes there's a high level of, ingenuity and entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial mindset. So, but he, man, I hope that there's so much potential in that Sport Dream Academy. You're probably familiar with some of the guys he's helped out. There's been guys that even before I got actively involved as a counselor and as part of his staff, there were kids I was looking at, at the last part of my college days, and then prep school. I'm always tapping into. It's coming along. England, I think, is a little bit further along. Luau Dang's done a great job. I saw Lloyd Gardner was on I know Lloyd. He going back to his Barking Abbey days. I think he's moved on now to. Is he in the pro level now, I believe?
Yeah, so the British BBL league. So that was one of the leagues I played in as well, and a couple of the guys that came, or Colin. I don't know if you watched the Colin O'Reilly episode, but he's played over there as well. There's a few guys, and it's one of these leagues that it's probably ahead of the Irish Super League, but it's still, in terms of first leagues in Europe, maybe not as good as some of the first leagues in Europe. So it'd be, I would say, the league in Germany that I played in, that was the second league, and the top teams there would be completely professional players, and it would be better than. But the top 4 leagues in the British League would be very good, be very strong, could compete in like.
But would you agree there's been some moment? Obviously it always comes.
There has been.
Business. Again, you're not naive to that, but in general, it seems like when I come back from being over there, and I haven't done much in England the last couple of years. Joe Mantegna is a good friend of mine at Blair, and he's a tremendous coach and has done a lot overseas as well. And I know from the feedback he gives me, because he coached Luau Dang in prep school, there's been a lot of infrastructure and things put in place through different initiatives that they've taken on. And again, that's what really, yes, you need the funding, you need the dollars. I've heard the song and dance about that. And obviously I agree with that, because look at what's happening in America right now with American sports. College universities are cutting left and right, cutting sports. Everyone's being extremely conservative. There's only a handful of universities, athletic departments that are really in the black. They're all taking from different parts of campus and other funding. I mean, anybody tries to fool you otherwise is, they're not being forthright and true, right? Okay. So I get those problems, but I think the thing I love about what you're doing, what Paul's doing with Sport Dream Academy, what guys like Jay Colleen are doing, Jason, in terms of just giving back to the community, what Puff Summers, as a guy that played for McKillop, knows Steph Curry, played at a high level in Davidson, just starting like, bloom where you're planted. I talk about Fran O'Hanlon, bloom where you're planted. Like, what can we do here? Like, here's our bedroom. My bedroom's a mess, right? What can I do in the next 15 minutes to make this bedroom better than I found it, And I think a bunch of you guys, great guys just to be around. Again, I look forward to getting to know you, but it's just cool to see you guys rolling your sleeves up, with the Sport Dream Academy, with, Matt Hall's another, Paul Kelleher. These guys are just rolling their sleeves up saying, hey, we know this is a nurture thing. Like, yes, we're not going to ever be the most athletic country as it relates to basketball, right? Because we're competing against big time countries with over 300 million people, i.e. the U.S., but we can at least put more infrastructure in place at the grassroots level to give us a fighting chance. And where I think it's going to be interesting, Mark, and sorry to go on with this, but I'm very passionate about this, is 3-on-3. Because 3-on-3 to me is interesting because there's a couple things that you have going your way across the globe, okay? One, it's less people, right? So you got to find 3 needles in a haystack, or 4 with the sub, right? Yeah. You have more space, right, to compensate. If you're in a 5-foot space and you're going against a 6'8" athlete who's just a freak of nature, or what have you, I don't care how skilled you are, there's going to be some limitations there, right? So you have more space. I think the shot clock, in my opinion, should go up to 16 seconds. I think 12 is very limiting. Tough. It'll be interesting to see the evolution of the game if they do even get it to 15. Just that extra couple seconds to allow for a little more multiple action, and it's new. So it's a thing where you're not so far behind. It's like soccer in America. Like, I'm biased because, I guess it's the arrogance of an American, but I feel like if Allen Iverson and LeBron James and Chris Paul played soccer their whole life, we'd be pretty good at soccer in the world. Hopefully I don't, get shot when I walk down Richmond Street to the Bernard Shaw. Although I heard the Bernard Shaw closed. You know that place?
The Bernard Shaw closed, which is really sad, actually, because that was a like institution. Yeah, it was interesting what you said about the soccer, because the last guy I was talking to, Casey, who's again Paul's connection, said we were just talking about the same thing, that almost like it's like Europe's catching up. Well, arguably catching up with the basketball that's happening in America, or been there, and it's almost the same with soccer in America has started to catch up on the rest of the world as well. So we're
so far behind. I mean, we think we're catching up, and I don't know too much about soccer. Early in my coaching days, I lived with a few. Obviously, we're all just trying to make it and get ahead. So a bunch of us lived together that were college coaches at Lafayette at the time. And actually, one of my roommates is now the head coach at Penn, soccer coach at Penn, and well connected through Europe. A guy by the name of Brian Gill. But he used to always chuckle, like, we're so far behind. Obviously he's a huge advocate for growing the game in the States, and I'm sure he's had a big impact on that. But, but I definitely think, I've been fortunate to go over and work with the Sabonis Institute in Lithuania and some different people in Lithuania, do some training there and what have you. and like to do more of it in Eastern Europe, because I think that's just an awesome area for the game in terms of just it being a global game now. I mean, look at the players that have come out of Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. Like, you'll go into that gym, one of those gyms, and the cones are out and the chairs are out, and it's drill, 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 boom, 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 before you get to the next thing, and then the next, And I think one of the things that we have to be careful here, in terms of our exceptionalism around the game in the States is, you want to, sorry to keep bringing up, I'm just looking at my damn guitar here. But I'm looking at if you want to be good at music, it's like, why do I stink at the guitar? I love it. I enjoy it. I try to pretend I'm Bob Dylan, around the campfire, but I'm far from it. But I don't do scales. I don't put the time in every day to learn a riff, and then incorporate into the whole song, the whole, chord progression. So, and again, not to sound cheesy, but the analogy is, if we're not careful in the States, the athleticism has carried us and will continue to carry us because we have a huge talent pool to pull from. But I do see guys like yourself, the Paul Cummings, the different, there's a load of them. You go across Western Europe and then obviously Eastern Europe, globally, that are just, there's infrastructure being put in place. There's talent sourcing being put in place. There's different contractual business things being put in place across FIBA that's making some things more fluid. Not to get in the weeds with that, but just the world's flat, and one of the things that you're seeing, obviously you saw it first in business and globalization, as we know, but of course, sports and other things around just being human and life endeavors was going to follow. And I think you're seeing that in basketball. And that's what I always say, like when I come over and speak in Europe or I speak in Ireland, yes, you're still going against a giant in terms of the broader athleticism you'll face. Paul, I think, spoke to you about some of his adjustment. And he adjusted nicely. He had a nice career at Lafayette. In fact, if he didn't get hurt his senior year, we would have had a much better, because I was coaching at the time at Live, still on staff. I think we started 5 or 6-0. We had double-digit wins. And he got hurt. He probably told you a little bit. I didn't listen to the whole the whole thing about, I'm sure he got into his career a little bit, but he adjusted nicely. But he also had the luxury now of coming to the States for 2 years. And he was a really good athlete. I know, I heard in the beginning part, you would face each other when you guys were kids, so in general, you might not have the athleticism in Ireland, England, some of these other countries, but you can at least inch that forward by having the right coaching programs, the right, player development programming, the right educational platforms. Of course, you're an education platform as a podcast. Any podcast is. You're giving information. So, if I was an Irish kid, in Galway, and it's been, other sports that I've grown up with, this would be an invaluable resource to me. I could listen to this, after a family dinner and dream about, here's a bald, gray face. I guess on my way to gray face. It's I'm holding up as strong as I can there, Mark.
You're doing all right, dude.
But so that exposed. Here's a guy that coached. He doesn't look much different than me, or his background, whatever. So so on and so forth. And it'll just be interesting. But I think the 3-on-3, I think 5-on-5 is ultimately that's the treasure. That's the main. That's what everyone wants to win a gold medal at the 5-on-5, or wants to make the NBA 5-on-5, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think for us, this is a really cool time, because how many times, Mark? I think you're in your late 30s, mid 30s. I'm 40.
36. Catching up.
Yeah. So we're in that same, we're in the same age bracket. How many times do you get to experience a major node in a sports evolution? Like, you have volleyball and then beach volleyball, right? Sure. Obviously, basketball, you could talk about implementing the 3-point line, right? Whatever, you can give me some as it relates to your sports, but or the biggest sports in your country and throughout Europe. But the bottom line is, for basketball, what we're passionate about first and foremost, this is a huge node in the evolution of this sport. The 3-on-3,
sure.
America's behind. I mean, you look at
But
what's going on.
you guys have the veteran thing going on there, which has got really popular. Like the viewership on that is huge now. You have the NBA guys playing 3-on-3,
Yeah, yeah,
big three,
yeah.
which is great because I'm getting to watch all these legends play. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's cool. The only thing I would say is like that. What is the fight? And I'm sure Ice Cube. I mean, we would love if he would tune into this, right, for your sake. But I don't know the what is the 4, 5, 6 point shots. I mean,
oh yeah, that stuff's in it.
I think if they add, and it'd be interesting for you to talk to some of the 3-on-3 guys, whatever. But
I have a guy from Brazil that I played with in China.
I would love to hear
this.
that.
And he won so he does 3-on-3, plays for Brazil 3-on-3, and he's the number one-on-one player in the world in 1 year. Yeah, he played on our 5-on-5 team in a kind of a team pulled together. Leandro something. Yeah, I can't even remember his name. Sorry.
You should interview. You said you're.
I'm going to get him on, but I remember his English was very broken.
Oh, okay.
But he's all over the 3-on-3 stuff, and
it'll be interesting to see what he says. It'd be interesting, and like I said, we use 3-on-3 a lot at Choate. You know, again, I coach prep school now, as you know, but it's just 3-on-3 is gonna be interesting. It's gonna be, and I do think, without having played it at the level that we're seeing it, like on FIBA and these pros, I just feel like they're going to have to increase that shot clock. You know, because I've been looking at a bunch of, you know, again.
What's the idea behind the 12? It's 12 seconds, is it?
Yeah, but it's 12 seconds. From what I understand, as soon as, again, I've done some things with it, but not, you know, I'm looking forward to getting more involved. In fact, we're working on some things here in the States, just regionally where I reside and where I coach. We're starting to do some things, some different initiatives with 3-on-3, because it's not going away. It's only going to get bigger. That's nice. That's cool entertainment.
Yeah.
I love seeing like Allen Iverson and all that. But more, it's going to become like the way they're trying. It's become a serious sport across the globe.
Isn't it going to the Olympics? I'm pretty sure.
It was supposed to go. It's going to go. Obviously, Olympics are postponed. But it'll be once kids start seeing the Olympics, I think inevitably it will take off.
Yeah.
And when you look at it, so we've been looking at it, and we use it at Choate to build up to 5-on-5s. I think it's a great, talk about transferable nature. I think it's a great way to get kids to think in space, play in space, and then I start adding players, you know. And obviously, depending on, there's all different ways to coach the game and play the game. But, you know, one of the big commonalities in any offense you run, unless you run in just 2-3 brick and mortar sets every time for your best player, you know, if you're running any type of continuity or read and react, where you're trying to incorporate more than maybe one player, you know, you're still going to maximize your best players. But, you know, inevitably you're going to have those triangles, you're going to have that certain spacing. So 3-on-3 is a great way to kind of build that up.
True,
but what I would say to you is, with the 12 seconds, in some ways it negates that. You know, like, I don't think it should be 24. I don't think 3 people should just be having a catch out there like windshield wiper. But it'd be nice to have like 3 or 4 more seconds, so that screen for screener or that roll replace high-low.
Yeah.
Or that, look at it, just looking at some of the free stuff they have, you know, FIBA has been just streaming everything.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting. It's like, it really is a one-on-one game. I mean, they have some real simple, like pick and roll or a quick high-low off the pick. But could you imagine it go like 3 or 4 more seconds and allow for one more like layer of action? I think it could be a beautiful, I mean, it is a cool game, but I think it'd be a beautiful game.
That's interesting. I never thought about it, actually. Yeah. One thing I maybe some basketball purists don't love the 3-on-3 as much, but I quite enjoy watching it. I've done a little bit of it. I did it in London. They had the 3-on-3 tournaments. I found it, interestingly, I enjoyed it more playing it, but found it harder. Even though I think we got to the final of one of the London ones, and we nearly got to the European thing with me and 2 Serbian guys. And I really enjoyed playing it, but I found that teams could beat you with guys that if you were on the court with them, you probably, I don't know, there's just a different dynamic to it. Like,
explain that. What do you mean?
So we were playing against 3 street ball guys, and they bet us, and it was like, I was like, if I got these guys on the court, I'd kill them. But
Well, that's
for some
what I'm
reason,
saying. I think, there's something to be said about a guy that can just go at someone and beat someone one-on-one. I mean, you're saying about this Brazilian who's one-on-one. I mean, the bottom line is, like, you got to be able to make a play. I mean, you're a former pro. I played Division I. We both have coached, whatever. We're in the game. You got to be able to make a play. Like, at some point, if someone's always sloughing off you, and you're creating a help defender all the time, you probably shouldn't be on the court, right? So
right, yeah.
there's some realities to being able to go one-on-one. But I agree with you. But that's what I'm saying to you is that if you add a few more seconds, I think you add a complexity, another level to the game, which is what ultimately makes 5-on-5 just like poetry. I mean, I'm completely biased, but like I fell in love with the game at 6 years old because it's just the fluidity of it. I didn't know it at the time, but like the fluidity. So I agree with you. I just think the 12 seconds, I mean, we're going to continue to run with it here because that's the FIBA rules. But it just will be interesting to see how the thing plays out. But it's not going anywhere. It is. We're behind in the States, and it's now in the Olympics. So you're going to see a lot of neat things happen around, and not just the game and coaching and playing, but also the business side of it. That's going to be a whole silo of industry in this game. And because you think about it, America really hasn't done much yet. I mean, the USA has to do something because they see it happening. I mean, those folks, their staff has to have a beat on what's going on globally with the game. I mean, they're our governing body. But the reality is we really haven't done a lot outside of coaches like myself or people that are into it, that do it as build-ups.
Right.
I think you're going to see an explosion. I think once America really leans into it, the states really lean into it and build a whole even business part to it, I think it's going to be really cool to see. If you're into this, if you're into basketball, like you're into, like we're basketball guys, like someone might be listening to this, that's like, what, 3-on-3, like, that's something playing in the schoolyard after, you wait for my kids play while I'm on my way from work to pick them up, but if you're a coach and you've been in it, and you and I both know it's a neat way to, we've done some things to show with it, and you get exposed. I mean, one of the things I'll tell you, you're saying about the different types of players you get. One thing you couldn't argue with me on is that you got to be in good shape. You got to be quick to spots. You got to be able to, you're definitely going to be exposed. I mean, there's not a ton of defense at times in 3-on-3 for those reasons. But I know this is the last thing I'll say. I really have enjoyed talking to you, by the way. But one of the things where I really felt like, man, this could get serious here in the States with 3-on-3 is when a good friend of mine by name of Steve Ongley, he's an up-and-coming coach. At the time, he was an assistant at Dartmouth. And I was looking, you can recruit in prep school. In fact, there's a lot of recruiting, South Kent, Northfield, Mount Herman. I told you about Exeter. I mean, these are all schools we play, and these are like national programs. So I feel like a college coach now. So there is a level of recruiting. And I remember calling the Ivy and Patriot guys because we're a really good academic school. Just on paper, we're a top tier school. So we tend to get kids that then will matriculate to the best academic schools. And it's fluid that way. Like they come, I think, about Paul's history. He went to Ravencroft. That was a great academic school. Then he went to South Kent, and then he made it to a top tier school in Lafayette. So similar model, right? And what I would say to you is, Steve Ongley says, yeah, I have a kid for you. I call these guys, I'm talking to Steve, who's assistant Dartmouth. I said, Steve, I'm looking for another kid late. Like I like to get, I don't know if he can get in because we're past the admissions deadline, but if it's a really quality kid, sharp on paper academically, obviously high character kid, et cetera, et cetera. So he said, a week goes by, he texts me, he says, I have a kid for you. He's an Italian kid. I'm going to send you stuff on him. Now, this is like a year and a half, 2 years ago. He's not at Steve's not at Dartmouth anymore. And he says, I'm sorry, this is before he went to Dartmouth. I misspoke there. This is before he went to Dartmouth. He is now on staff there with Dave. But he sends me a text of this Italian kid playing 3-on-3. And I thought at first it was like, and again, a couple years ago, I'm like, this is interesting. Like he sent me 3-on-3. This is like, cause we've all seen, I don't think, I've learned a little bit about your background, but I don't think you've been in a recruiting position before, but it'd be like, in recruiting, you get like these hokey, everyone has a highlight film. You've never seen a bad highlight film. We could have a whole discussion on video and technology for recruiting and all that, but you'll get these crazy videos, kids like working out, and he has no idea that this is just not the type of film you want to put together. And, so I thought maybe it was like one of those, like he's going to send me 3-on-3, like just a charity tour this kid's doing. But, I was just starting to get involved and starting to look at FIBA, 3-on-3 as a serious thing with FIBA. And it was a great way to evaluate this kid. It was a great way. Like the kid had space, he could make a play. Again, I think that beating a dead horse about the shot clock, but there was still some actions there, pick and roll, where he had to make decisions, et cetera, et cetera. And I was able to evaluate him on a 20-minute, 30-minute FIBA 3-on-3 event.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. And I remember talking to some buddies, and again, this is a couple years ago where we're behind here in America, but you're going to be out there. It's fluid. I mean, there's a transferable nature to it. You can compete 3-on-3 and make decisions at point of actions with a pick and roll or, pick and pop or roll, replace, throwback, cut off the post. Again, 12 seconds, you're probably only picking one of those things, but you can evaluate a kid, and you can evaluate the kid's conditioning. You can evaluate his footwork. Think about that footwork, getting out from underneath the hoop to a lot of times that shortest distance to the corner, because the shot clock starts right away. So it'll be also interesting to see how 3-on-3 impacts, just like the G League is having a huge impact right now. Sorry to kind of be all over the place, but it's just interesting to think about the evolution of the game, because we're in the game. We're in it. You're doing a podcast. I coach it at a good level. Like, the G League, I mean, it's really, have you seen what's going on with Adam Silver? I mean, he's no dummy, just with the pathway program. And now there's a lot of shakiness, at the college level with collegiate sports and how it might have a ripple effect on basketball. You're seeing, I mean, you had the kid, the two kids now, the names are escaping me at the moment. Is it Green, Jalen, shoot. I bring it up, I should know the names.
Chaney Green?
Yeah, the two kids that went right to the G League, not the NBA.
I didn't know. Jalen Green has gone to the G League. I didn't know that.
And then the other kid,
from high school. Yeah.
Basically taking advantage of the pathway program, which I'm still learning some ins and outs, just talking to different guys I know, whether it's agents or whatever, guys that are in it, contractually at that level to learn more. But the G League it's just again, the world is flat, it's not a siloed world anymore. So where there's information, there's going to be activity. You know what I mean? There's going to be new ideas, and be changes, and could be, different ways of doing things, because you're going to have people that before didn't have the breadth of knowledge and the access. Like one of the things, and I definitely don't want to get political, but because we're dealing with a lot of stuff here in the States, with partisan divide and a polarized society. But one of the things that I have no problems at the Thanksgiving dinner, at the holiday dinner, saying is, we can argue, we can go around the farm about what's right, wrong, policy, procedure, how much taxes should we pay, how little taxes should we pay, so advances and so on. We can go through the whole litany of issues that a society has to think about, especially a society as diverse and big as ours. But you will not get me to jump on the bandwagon of, we're just going to go back to the way it was and isolate and like we're good. Like, leave us alone. Good. Like, we're not, that's not where the world is. And if you're going to think that way in terms of scarcity, opposed to abundance, another great book, Abundance, by Diamitis. But, you're in trouble. And it's the same thing with basketball. Like, they're coming. Ireland's coming. England's coming. Eastern Europe's coming. Africa's coming. Australia is there. I mean, Australia is, and Lithuania is there. Like,
Lithuania as well.
And this might sound like, it's like, man, what's this guy? But if you're in it, you're thinking about it. You're thinking how it connects to the broader world. I mean, So
I would totally agree with that. I mean, there's a couple of countries there that you mentioned, like especially Eastern Europe now. Just even the amount of Serbs that play basketball that I've played with just in London and now on my team now, but and I've been over to Serbia since, and it's such a big sport there. Lithuania, I mean, it's the number one sport in Lithuania. Like it's everybody plays it. Like in school, if you talk to the Lithuanian guys that I played with at university, actually in Scotland, there was a bunch of Lithuanian guys in our team. There's the Lithuanian team in Ireland. There's a ton of Lithuanian people. Like, so it's the number one sport.
What do you mean there. Lithuanian team in Ireland?
It was in the top league in Ireland. They had a team a couple of years ago. I think they've folded since, and it was just exclusively they were called Lithuanica or something. Or maybe that was in London. Actually, that was in London. So I get confused. But so it's just one of these things.
Well taken. The point's well taken.
Yeah, you're totally right. There's a catch up happening. I mean, even Luka Doncic and Dragic for Latvia. So like all those countries there, basketball's just massive, and it's taken off. And I think people sometimes in Ireland as well, they don't quite get that basketball is that big in certain parts of Europe. It's just huge. Spain's second sport. It's after football.
That's what's crazy. It's still, so I mean, I think Lithuania, it's their number one sport if you mention that. But well, that's one thing with the Sport Dream Academy that I find very beneficial to the kids in Ireland. And I've reiterated this to Paul, is that once you have, and I do think that we've done, again, I'm biased because I've been working with that academy and I continue to try to get my hands in some other things across the country, because I've met a lot of lifelong friends there, and again, I had a lot of mutual contacts going into it with Coach O'Hanlon and Paul, hopefully now you, et cetera. But so I'm biased, but one of the things I think we've done a pretty good job of is we've, Pat Price is another one that's trying to do a lot, and I mentioned Paul Keller and Matt Hall. So there's a whole host of them. But one of the things I think we've done specific to the Sport Dream Academy is we've really put an emphasis on getting better. Getting better. And then running parallel to that, as Cummings always says, put yourself in the shot window, exposure, right? And to me, like, that's probably the best way to go about it. And I'll tell you why, because, you genetically or the athleticism will come or it won't, right? Different things, like you look in Australia, there's been, and I'm not going to get into, because I also don't want to speak out of term or say something that is inaccurate, but I know in Australia, part of their political relations and government relations, immigration relations with the conflicts in Africa have had a basketball effect, right? So different, Sudan and South Sudan and different things there in Australia over time changed the trajectory of some of the Aussie talent. Doesn't mean that there weren't homegrown, typical Aussies, right? And again, I want to be careful in how I explain this, but I think conceptually you understand what I'm saying, is that, so there's things that can be at play that change the talent pool, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But where I think you can get in trouble, and this is what Paul always tells the group, and I speak to the group, and the luxury I have is I'm here in the States doing this, and I've done it at a Division I level. I've done it professionally. I'm doing it at a prep school level where, again, we're still recruiting. We're still, a hop, skip, and a jump from college. Is if you think you're just going to put a crazy highlight film together, if you're going to talk yourself into an opportunity, if you're going to, move, shake, and think you're going to, like, at the end of the day, you still have to be a good player. You still got to then be a great teammate. You're not going to, it's not going to work. So I think one of the things you're seeing in the States, especially as the pool in general has become global, you're seeing a lot of skip steps in the States, and that, if not careful, can erode the culture further of what it means to coach and mentor young people. And obviously you're seeing that with just even, how we had to bring in Condoleezza Rice. I'm not saying that we even got it right with the committee. I have some opinions on that, and I'm not saying Condoleezza Rice, isn't a very talented and successful woman. She obviously will be forever remembered, as a historical figure, political figure in our society. But the bottom line is there's no wonder why, we have the issues now with the sneaker circuits, and we have the issue with the portal with all these transfers. We have, so it goes round and round. So again, I come back, beating a dead horse with, if you have the right infrastructure in place and you have the right coaching design, yes, you got to get lucky with different things, whether it's people are moving into your country that just innately give way to being tall, or give way to being athletic, or give way, et cetera, et cetera. But like that right there, is not what needs to be the focus. And again, highlight films and artificial edges, that people like, my handler in the States is going to get me he's going to deliver me a scholarship, or I'm going to package these kids to get both kids a scholarship, and the cost of education is so out of control in the States that edginess is increasing, right? Because people are looking at like supporting their kid, and getting them to the next point in their life through sports, basketball. So I just think with Ireland, specific to Ireland, these developmental, I forget what the official name for them is, but these dev camps that you're doing throughout the country, I think those are critical. I think coaching programs, coach to coach, I think there's probably a lot of young coaches that would be hungry to learn more, because there's one thing to be to be drill skilled and be game skilled. Like one of the things that I've noticed, and Paul's asking me what I think about in Ireland, I said, I think you're making moves. Like there's some momentum here, just like there's some momentum in England. But there's a difference between being skilled with drills and playing the drill, and being, skilled just in a fluid way to really execute in game situations, and I think part of that, being able to get rid of the mechanical nature of that in players, really becomes an inherent thing in the coach's exposure on how to coach all aspects of the game. And that takes time. It's like Malcolm Gladwell's thing. It takes hours and hours of work on your craft. And I think that needs to start younger for the players, but also more robust for the coaches, and that there's more coach-to-coach programs in Ireland.
Okay, interesting.
That's interesting.
No, that's interesting. I've not actually heard that before.
Maybe more, and obviously more words, and we're scooting all around the conversation, but hopefully, the point I'm trying to make is just that infrastructure programs, we're doing it the right way and doing it the way we think collectively. We're never going to agree on everything. There's a million ways you can look at a drill. There's a million drills to do, but just conceptually, like, okay, this is the talent pool we have. Based on the talent pool we have, okay, it's what I said earlier about repertoire. Like, this is the environment, all right? These are the people and the kids in the environment. We don't have anybody else walking through the gym or the door. So how can we maximize these kids, these young Irish players who love the game, want to be successful in the game, want to see their country succeed in the game, and building programs around that. And inevitably, if you're not at the right of that bell curve of athleticism, I'm not saying bell curve and jump, but if you're not like there in terms of just an outlier athletically, then it's going to have to be more heavy on the player development, skill development side. And that starts skill development. Skills is a curriculum type thing. It starts with the coaches. So the coaches have to have more of a fluid way, to coach and teach game. And I'm not making an indictment across, because to be honest with you, some of my people that I highly, highly respect in the game are people in Ireland trying to do just that. Paul Keller, Matt Hall, obviously Paul Cummings, in conjunction with his career that he has by day. Pat Price is actually originally from the States, if I'm not mistaken. There's a whole host of them, you with this podcast. But I think that's where, and then I think as you have success, then all bets are off on who might want to be in the country, and then who happens to be. You see that with, as you build the baseline level of player in Ireland, then naturally, based on contractual obligation, right, you're going to have better Irish players that make up the majority of the Super League teams, which in turn will attract more U.S. players that want to take a couple years and play there, which then begets success, right? Success. Now everything starts raising up. Now people, some player, not to sound goofy, meets his wife in Ireland, stays, has kids. This kid happens to be a hell of an athlete, and so it goes. So to me, the programming is key, and you can't cheat that. Like that can't just be like, and I'm actually regurgitating some of the things that the coaches have said when I sit with them. We have a pint or we talk ball. We all love this stuff, but like I talk to again, the likes of Cummings and whatnot, and even players like Jason Colleen, like, where do you need to see this go? Puff Summers. And it really comes down to, if you could just get that financial piece a little more robust and a little bit better, and that funding a little bit better. I don't know. Again, I don't know. Now I'm kind of talking off the reservation where I'm not sure, I don't know all the players at hand with that. Yeah. But you got to make a commitment to it. But I don't think it has to be such a commitment where, like, even in the States, people have, and a lot of international coaches have this misconception of, like, if you coach Division I, you've made it. No, like, I've had to wear numerous hats to make my life go financially. Now, I made some smart decisions early with, different investment decisions. Again, we're talking basketball, but just relative to this point, whether it was some real estate decisions I made, I've been involved in some other startups. I was fortunate to have a breadth of network and just things I was involved with that complemented my coaching, that allowed me to have a longer runway than most, right? But the reality is like, just because you coach at a high level in the States doesn't mean you're so financially well off or you made it. Like, we're all wearing different hats. So my whole thing, my rebuttal to the conversation in Ireland about that is, if you can just move the needle another 5% financially, or that infrastructure another 5 to 7%, I think you're going to see an exponential return. Maybe not seats in the stands, maybe not the black and white things that the executives want to see in terms of return on investment, but in terms of us as coaches, I think you can take a step. Like, the first year I went over, and sorry I'm being long-winded, but I'm passionate, especially as it relates to Ireland. The first year, Mark, I went over to Ireland for the Sport Dream Academy, maybe one kid, maybe one or two. I mean, you know some of the list. I mean, I'm John Carroll. There's a couple of them, right? Flood was in that. In fact, I love. We had Sean and Connor. Connor's been a counselor. He's great. But and by the way, one of the up and coming women's coaches in the game is a young lady by name Erin Bracton. I don't know if you know her.
Yeah, the names come past me, actually.
Involved with the Irish, obviously the women's side. She could coach men or women, but she's, I've been very fortunate, even early in my career, to have different experiences and use the game to see different things. She's got it. I mean, I know she had flirted with coming over to the States to coach. So there's another young voice for you to maybe take under your wing a little bit. But yeah, so like when I first went over, it was maybe one. Now, I mean, last year, unfortunately this year with the pandemic, we couldn't do it. There might have been, I kid you not, Mark, there might have been 8 kids I would have taken at Choate today. And Choate usually, like in the past 3 years, we had a down year this year, but the previous 2 years, I said earlier in the podcast, went 40-13, won New England's. Paul talked about prep school, how competitive it is, New England Prep League, won our league in 2019. I got a kid in the ACC, I got a kid at Georgetown, I got a kid that just graduated from Syracuse, kid just finished up Lafayette, another kid going to Lafayette, a dozen kids in D3, more or less. So, and that's not to say, hey, look at me. It's just say that my resume, I like to think that I do have 10,000 hours at this point where at least I can speak in an educated way about this and the perspective on this. Yeah. And to me, like I've seen strides even at the Sport Dream Academy. I mean, there were probably half dozen 8 kids that, I got back and I called some of my buddies in college and said, hey, there's a kid that has a potential to be a scholarship level kid after a year of prep school. They may not be ready because to your point, like they need, and what we're saying about, what you're trying to do with this podcast, like exposure, you just need exposure. I think Paul talked early in the podcast with you just about when he went to Ravenscroft, how awesome of a 2-year, first Ravenscroft in South Kent. I know it's South Kent. I mean, who was he playing with at South Kent? He had the kid, he went to Miami that was terrific.
Yeah, Darrell Wright. I think it was Darrell Wright.
Didn't Wright go right to the league, or he
went straight from high school, he said, to the league, and
so
he
that's
was
Paul, like the Paul guy, you know.
crazy.
Paul was an outlier here, you know. I told you, Dr. Midas, what Midas touch. Paul, I think he was a good soccer player. You know, the guy could play music.
Yeah, he was very talented. But no, I think you're spot on, and it's interesting because there's a lot of ways to look at it, but it comes down to the coach, and like you said, it has to start there because, and it comes down to, I think you're right about the skills part of it too. It needs to be catching them at a younger age, and then trying to get the skill level up is key, and then making sure that the coaches are coaching the right stuff.
What do you see? Obviously you've been talking to some people.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure you've had a whole host of conversations even leading into this podcast. I mean, it sounds like you want to impact the game in your country. I mean, podcasts, they can take on a global thing, global audience, but I'm sure you're near and dear to Irish basketball. What do you see? I mean, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, just coming back again, I've kind of been out of the country, and I've been in the UK, so I've seen what they've done over there. And there's more infrastructure, like you said, over there. So they have things like these basketball academies that they've set up over there. So one of the things that Lloyd Gardner did was set up that basketball academy in the UK, and that gave a more kind of formalized structure. So it's almost like what Paul did, but all year round. So it's basically like a prep school almost in the UK. And that was pretty much the first one to do it full time. And he's kind of explained that. And now there's other ones popped up around the country in the UK. And they actually have a separate league called the Basketball Academy League, and it's just for these academies. And there's a ton of those players now going to play on a higher level and go to America. So they've got a lot more talent coming through these academies, which are just specializing in basketball, more coaching, more intensity, and it's starting to they're playing against each other.
The financial, because you and I both know, I was scooting around a little bit, but obviously you still need money to make these programs go. Right. Have they just committed that, or is it the lights go out thing and certain guys? Because they've had a few guys now come out of the country who have done more than just play D1. You know, do
you mean in terms of how they're funded?
Financial infrastructure.
Yeah, well, that's what I didn't get with Lloyd. They had a very strange model that I don't know if it's been replicated in the other academies. I'm not quite sure. I think some of the academies might be private academies where the kids pay to go. I don't know. But for Lloyd's one, he said that the more kids they got into the school program, the more money they would get from the government, and they would inject that back into the basketball program. And he said that the council were lucky enough to give Barking Academy, which is the academy in East London, the accommodation at the start. So they kind of shoestring started it up, and they figured out a way. And I mean, if you have a will, and London's one of these places where there's a lot of opportunity to get stuff done, and there was already a football academy there, so they kind of had a blueprint to take through. So it was just interesting to see that they did it there. They started off with one or two players, and then they kind of went to Europe to these big tournaments that they play in over there with these other, Barcelona, some of these huge academies like the Sabonis School. And he said it took them a while, but they slowly started to realize that the standard they needed to get to, the coaching started to, I guess they increased the intensity, or whatever they did to figure out how they could compete with these bigger academies in Europe. They did. And he said that that's improved the standard of basketball over there. And it's just one of these things that I think if you had something like that in Ireland, I know there is actually one academy in Dublin called NABA, where there's a guy called Rusty that has started some kind of academy, but like they have multiple ones in England now, and it's just looks like there's more and more players now going to play at a high level, whether it's in America or even they have pathways now to play in. There's a guy I'm getting on that didn't go to America. He played in Loughborough University, but then he went on to play professionally. He plays for GB now, and he went on to play in Australia. So he took a different pathway. But to think that there's some infrastructure there where you can actually go play for university, and it was linked to a BBL team, the Leicester Riders. He played for Loughborough. So stuff like that, you know.
I think that's a no-brainer. And I don't know enough about it outside of, Paul, obviously Garth McGuire, I know. So I know that there's been some of that where, and it seems smart to me, especially if you're at a lower infrastructure country, where
Yeah.
there's just not as much, financial infusion to have a robust, again, Spain, Italy, these countries are just, of course, the
Streaks
States,
ahead.
they're just, but I think that model makes sense. It's logical. But I do think some of this, and if nothing else, maybe, I irk somebody without having all the data. So again, some of this is naive on my part because although I've been involved in Ireland the last couple of years, I'm passionate about helping with the game over there. I have ancestry there. I have lifelong friends there. I've recruited players from there, et cetera. It's multi, on numerous levels. I want to see the country succeed in basketball, and whatever I can do to help and be a part of it, I'd like to do that. And I've made that clear to some of you folks. Some of the folks at Basketball Ireland and Paul, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, again, what I'm about to say might be a little naive, but some of this is like putting your pennies before your dollars. Like when I was at the Development Academy, all right, that we've mentioned numerous times on this podcast. I know you talked to Paul about it because I think he runs the Dublin, the eastern portion of that.
That's right, Leinster, yeah.
I just, for some reason, I can't think of the name off the top of my head. It's basically the academy. It's getting the kids in at a younger age. They're really trying to get them exposed to the right way to play the game, develop the game.
I think it's just called. I don't know if it's called National Academies, but he's doing the Leinster one. So
but it goes out of fee. Basketball Ireland is supporting it, from my understanding.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I think that's great. And when I was there, I went to the one in Dublin. I was over there when they had one of the academies. I was at the one in Dublin, and I'm picking brain and just playing a little dumb in different areas and just trying to get feedback. And I think these coaches, I mean, they're working day jobs. They have families. They have all these other responsibilities. Not totally unlike a coach in America who's trying to make it. I mean, trying to make it as a basketball coach in America at the highest level is it's like trying to be an actor in Hollywood or a rock star. I mean, it's a very small percentage of people. And you got to really take your hat off to that population that really wants to do that and stay committed to that. Now, I think a lot of people are naive in that there's some other ways you can do it and still get there. That's why I said about deciding how you want to push, right?
Right.
But in terms of Ireland, like you have these guys that you can tell, like from what I could gather, they want to be basketball coaches. Like they may still like Gaelic football. They still might, there might be other things that that they are into, soccer, whatever. But the reality, I mean, hurling, talk about the talent to be in hurling. Holy cow.
That's crazy.
How they can run so, I still think some of the best athletes in the world are hockey players. To be able to do all that maneuvering on that thin
ice skates. It's incredible.
It's incredible. But if you're in basketball, and I think these guys are, Saturday morning, whatever it was, we're like, working at our craft. It's just there has to be maybe a little more of a commitment to say, like, we're not going to put our pennies before our dollars. Like, we're going to have a substantial long-term commitment to try to get us over the hump. And then really to do that, you got to start with the end in mind and say, what does over the hump look like? Is it to get out of the small countries bracket? Is it to, have so many kids matriculate to the U.S., and gain that experience and then come back and give back, not only in basketball, but to, our country via jobs at Apple and other, large corporations that are taking advantage of the financial structure in Ireland in terms of corporate tax rates, like whatever, like we could have, that's for a dinner conversation, a glass of wine. Right. But I think that there seems to be, like in any organization, like when I first got out of college coaching, I worked on 2 different startups. One was a miserable failure. One was successful and has helped me, set a tone for what I'm doing now in terms of having some leeway financially, et cetera, et cetera. And the reality is they were both great experiences. Again, one just on paper was a little more successful in terms of what it led to than the other. But the one that was a failure, the lesson I learned there was not only, as we talked about on this podcast, just how direct the sports mindedness is to the entrepreneurial mindset, those connections, but all, team building, grit, pivoting, iteration, think about what makes a player, right? At the end of the day, given there's a level of talent, right? The biggest thing I learned was we needed to put more resources. Like we needed to take some of the capital that was put in front of us. We had to, not look at it. Maybe it was a 6% convertible note that seemed to be just a small business loan, right? But that maybe could have got us through the gap of not putting the pennies before the dollars. Yes, bootstrapping is a big part of entrepreneurship, no doubt. I would not tell anybody to overextend themselves. Do everything you can until you can't do it, and then go out and, so I don't want to confuse that. But I think Basketball Ireland's at an inflection point where, from what I've gathered, again, the footnote here is I'm not in the boardroom with the executives at Basketball. I don't know the sponsorship. Obviously the current COVID climate has changed everything across, it's a pandemic. Everyone's affected. But I feel like you're right there, But I also feel like right there is a slippery slope. Like what's right there to you, Mark? What's right there to someone like me who's just involved as an ex-Division I coach and American? What's right there to Jason Colleen and Puff Summers and Paul Cummings? That's when I'm sitting having a pint of Guinness with everyone. I'm not even sure like what's right, like what is over the hump for Basketball Ireland. Once you kind of get that universally accepted, then you can digress back and say, okay, what is going to be the commitment here? Like there's some guys that really want to see that thing fly, like Matt Hall. Matt Hall, do you know Matt Hall at all? Technical director, like he's always thinking, I love having conversation with him about, he works at Sport Train. He gives his time there. I know he does a lot of other stuff on a higher level with the game in Ireland, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just biased. Maybe this is just kind of getting lost in the wind,
No,
but I think you're I think the reason you're taking on this initiative is you're passionate about it. It's like nature versus nurture. There's a fine line between nature and nurture. You see the most talented people in the world fall by the wayside because they didn't have the right, guardianship. They didn't have the right support system. They didn't have the right coaches. Going back to our first 2 minutes of conversation about why I was on a basketball path. I was on a basketball path, one, because, I had good coaches and good people around me. There's no reason I should have went on to play Division I basketball at 5'10" from the suburbs of Central PA. But I just was nurtured. Just the stars are aligned for me in a certain way where I fell in love with the game, the fluidity of the game. I probably would have enjoyed hockey and lacrosse and just soccer. Was I played American football. I got recruited for American football. I just didn't like the start-stop. Baseball lost me early. My father-in-law will kill me because he's a big baseball fan. I do that kid with the glove on his head out in left field, I don't know how familiar you are with baseball, but just a little.
I've watched a few games.
I know it's a thinking man's game, I'm told by my in-laws, but so the stars are aligned. I got involved with the right people. And I think that's kind of what, I think it needs to happen. And then it has to happen where people aren't feeling the scarcity of it. Like they're going to feel like, it's being supported across silos, because if you're creating a water cooler situation where there's only so many spots, I realize life and industry in general is competitive, but that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here as coaches, as a design to make the country better at basketball, what needs to be done. And I think, I think you're onto it again, but every time I go a little bit further in the conversation with folks over there, people that I really respect, I think are really good coaches, and again, I'm biased, or their friends and colleagues, they get to a point where it's like, well, we're all kind of on a different page, or this part of the country doesn't have this funding, or this part of the country is losing their funding, or this part of the country doesn't know where it's coming from, and we don't even know if Basketball Ireland is going to be around. Well, how are you supposed to make a push at the Olympics against a small country's group? How you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm really beating a dead horse. I'm taking a leap of faith that most of your audience probably will be Irish and Irish basketball fans.
Yeah, no, I mean, there'll be some people from the UK, but I mean, we talked about the UK as well, and they're in.
It seems similar. Joe
They're
Mategna, Blair, a great guy to talk to. I mean, he rolled his sleeves up. Blair Academy, one of the best. I mean, you talk about basketball factory. I mean, they're a good school too, and I respect the heck out of Joe Mategna. But he'd be another really good guy, man, and I'd be happy to introduce you. I think
Yeah,
Paul
that'd be great.
South Kent, because I'm not sure if Blair and South Kent played back in the day, but he's had a hand because he coached Luau Dang. See, and you don't have that yet. And when you have that, it's different. If you have one person as passionate about it as we are and has the capital to infuse it, then you can make you can expedite it, right?
Yeah.
But right now, you got folks that definitely are successful. Look at Paul Cummings. He's a successful businessman, has other business interests, obviously still loves the game, has his hands in it with Sport Dream Academy. But I think you're going to need a little bit more of a holistic approach at this. I mean, you look at Eastern Europe, and we've been talking for a while, but I mean, we could have a whole podcast on sort of how Eastern Europe, has developed, starting with, the Cold War. And it, at a very grassroots level, became a way out for certain kids based on early exposure to Michael Jordan and the 90s NBA. And how that was ruled with the Sabonis's coming back and starting academies and the whole host of that.
But I think that's the key, right? It's getting, and look at Luau Deng's the perfect example. He's set up the Deng 50 camp, and now look, that's producing players that are getting a lot of exposure and are going over and playing at a high level.
It's a heck of a camp, from what I understand now.
But I think we need a Deng. We need the guys that have played at a high level to come back and try and give back like what Paul's done, exactly like that. So it's just more of that, and more of feeding the young players, because the more people that have gone away and played at a high level, which it seems to be like. Our generation has had a few guys. We've had one of the guys, Michael Bree. He's unfortunately been stolen by Sweden at the moment. He's over in their academy. Sending them over, I'm thinking like we could do with Michael over here. Actually, if you want to come back and
Well, and the other thing is everyone's obsessed with more so Americans, but we're 23andMe. It's like there's some other cool things about 23andMe and everything. I'm really
23andMe.
Yeah, there's a number where you take the genome and your
I haven't done that yet, actually.
Yeah, Ancestry has one. The thing that's interesting is, one, it's cool. It's just cool that we can kind of have some access to that again. But what's interesting is to see that now they're advertising. You can, based on your DNA, they'll recommend a diet for you, and that's interesting to see that different body types. But what I was going to say about that is Americans are so obsessed with. My family's from Germany, or my family's from Scotland or Ireland. I'm Irish, I'm Italian. We're all immigrants in America.
It's true.
It drives me nuts about some of our political discourse in America. Is like, like we're an immigrant nation, for heaven's sakes. But point being that I was going to make to you is, I also think you have a lot of people that do have some type of loop back to your country, to Ireland and England, but Ireland specifically. And I also, that like Pat Connaughton, things like that, I've heard that, he has, some deep Irish roots. Now he's probably on track to be a part of the American teams, and at the highest level.
Right. He actually came on I think it was the Irish American Embassy in Dublin. And this was like recently, and I actually tried to jump on and leave a comment to see if he'd said he'd come on to the podcast. I don't think he replied, but he basically said that he has an interest in playing for the national team because he has a lot of heritage over here, like you were saying.
That's what I heard. Yeah, and his club coach, another guy that's been successful. What he does at the capacity he does it. Mike Crotty, he had played actually with a former high school teammate of mine. Played at Williams, was on a great set of teams at Williams, highest level D3. I mean, those guys, I told you about D1, D3. I mean, every level in America is, and that's the other thing about the Sport Dream Academy, as I was saying to you, a half hour ago, was, also getting these kids to understand that, yes, you got to get better, but also then, like,
just how much better you have to be, and the percentages at play if you want to play at any level in the States. And so, so this Michael Karate, who was Pat Connaughton's AAU coach, club coach, played with a former high school team and had a great career, and then was player development guy, I believe, for the Celtics. But he's a direct link to Connaughton, and and I have some, just not even from Mike, but just in general, just some hearsay of there's guys like that, and you guys know that. I mean, the executives at Basketball Ireland obviously know, they have to know the rules and how to work those rules. But even if you added that, like American coaches like myself who have Irish background, who want to help spread the word. Like for me specifically, and not to be selfish, but for me to get involved in USA basketball, right, at the level that I'm involved in it in Ireland, now you're up against Mike Krzyzewski's coaching tree. You're up against, Jim Boeheim. Although I've had a kid play for Coach Boeheim, it's just a different, it's a different. Yeah. It's not to sell myself short. It's not to be overly self-deprecating. I have a lot of those. That network is still alive and well, but it's just like thinking out. I think Basketball Ireland has to not put the pennies before the dollars. I say that again with a level of ignorance because I'm not in the boardroom having those discussions, but then think creatively like it's a startup. That's why I mentioned about the startup. Basketball Ireland's a startup. And you look at Basketball Ireland in 3-on-3, it's definitely a startup. The whole world is in a very early stage of 3-on-3. So it's like, so are you harnessing the Irish population and the antennae in America that have a passion for their heritage in basketball and then basketball in Ireland? Are you harnessing the kids that you have worked, like guys like you that have been in it, guys like Paul Cummings, Jason Colleen that have helped develop guys, that are now younger than me. I mean, I can't believe how successful he's been as far into his 30s. I mean, the guy's like freak, man. Colleen, how about it? He's like, how old's he? He's still like,
he's 35.
That's a monster pick and roll.
35.
His pick and roll is like he's 18 years old. But get those guys, like he's even talked about guys like the John Carrolls, the Blunts, the Floods. There's a number of them. And then, I'm missing even some of the best ones. And then you mix in, some of the guys like Connaughton, if he was to take a plunge and enjoy that experience. So if anything else, I'm passionate about, it's cool. It's like an underdog. It's like a startup. It's like an underdog company that if we continue to harness the right ideas and people like yourself that truly want to see it succeed, I think it can get there. I think it would just be, this is what the first year of those national academies will be interesting to see how that unfolds. But it's like, do you bail on them or are you going to keep leaning into them?
Right.
Like Sport Dream Academy. If I was Basketball Ireland, again, I continue to preface with, we're just having a conversation.
Right.
Right, connecting dots, it may or may not be connected. But the other thing would be is like Sport Dream Academy, again, biased, but I would be all over that as a national initiative if I was. That's like the Ireland's, that's like the Luau Dang 50 mark. Yes, could they launch that somewhere else? I know they have another, I think, in fact, Gormanstown, I think, is the site for the Basketball Ireland one. But if you look at what Paul has been able to build, Paul Cummings, and again, we've worked hard, the staff and the guys that are involved with that, and on the initiative, we've had success. It's like, let's not each be at a water cooler. Let's like join forces.
Yeah, there might even be some kind of, again, we don't know as you say, I'm just coming back in too. So it's
we're spitballing here,
Yeah, exactly.
They might listen to us and be like, these guys have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole thing is it's okay to come in and speak objectively about it because we're out. Well, I'm just coming back into it, and you've seen it a little bit too. You've come back into it, so I think we're okay to speak objectively. We're not saying anything negative. It's more just like, what could we do to try and help things, and what have we seen?
Well, and also race on a lot of. Sorry to cut you off because I want you to finish that point, but let me be clear. I'm saying this objectively because if there was nothing, then it wouldn't be worth it. I'd rather talk about how I run practice at Choate or some of the funny stories and being a journeyman for 8 years in division. Like, there's plenty of content we can talk about, right? And, maybe we talk again there. We can talk again.
Yeah.
But what I, but the focus, my thing is, again, where is Basketball Ireland going? And you look at, from the time I came over the first time to the time I came just recently, again, this year was canceled. We couldn't do anything, but the last, my vision is just, Temple Low, some of the Super League stuff, guys I've gotten to know there, Mark, talking to him about the national team, some of the guys that kind of bleed out of that, obviously Paul Cummings, Pat Price, Paul Keller, Matt Hall. I know there's a whole host of guys I've yet to meet, but like, there's been movement. I mean, there's been movement. Like, I go to clinics and different things, basketball initiatives in Ireland, and they look like basketball initiatives in the States. I mean, that's also, it's like, yeah, you may not have some of the athleticism. It's like Luau Deng. I asked you about Luau Deng. It sounds like that's as good as any camp in the world. I mean, kids are getting plucked out of that left and right. There's a bunch of Luau Deng 50 kids playing in the NCAA. And I think Ireland, again, I think the reason I'm beating a dead horse and to nauseam here is because I think there has been steps taken. It's actually been really right, from a very, like, to me, it is objective. It's kind of an outsider looking in. I'm not born and bred Irish, but I've taken interest in it. Et cetera. We've already gone around the farm with that. But it just be kind of cool, and like, then you mix in the 3-on-3, where now you have a whole nother arm of competition where you could continue to groom kids.
True. Yeah.
There's one thing in Ireland is the facility, right? It's the access to when you talk to the kids that can't. Well, this part of the reason we love Sport Dream Academy is because just we can come in here at night and shoot before obviously curfew, or we've had at Gormanstown the last couple of years. We had at Limerick University, which is beautiful.
Nice.
Kids, you just don't. And this is what I'm talking about, infrastructure. Like, let's just start building more courts in Ireland. Let's start with that. Why do you think we can have a philosophical debate about why basketball, is an urban game, or why soccer is big in Brazil. I mean, outlets for people, think this, lack of overhead, but if kids are growing up doing hurling, and I think hurling's a great sport. I think I went to the Dublin a couple years ago to Crow Park.
Yeah. Amazing.
I didn't make it to I think it was the semis. I mean, that was unbelievable. If you can't have a good time there and enjoy that sports experience, something's wrong with you. So, I cut you off. I'm sorry I cut you off there.
No, it's just interesting. Like, it's one of those ones that it's kind of obvious, but it's kind of a conundrum at the same time. There's definitely it's definitely easy to see that you have to start with the coaching, and I think you just have to stop waiting around for other people to do it and just do it yourself, like you said, like something like what Paul did, basically. Like, that's why I was so impressed with what he did. And God, I've talked about so much about his SDA already on the podcast, but I think it's just because there's a bunch of young talent in Ireland, and I could see that it was there, and it was there when I was there, maybe as well. But there was never any kind of, as I keep saying the word mechanism, I can't think of anything else to say, right? There was never something there to get some of those kids to be seen even. And even now, I talked to Jordan. He said his younger brother was looking to get some video footage, and there's just not even been videotaped. So it's more a case of, I mean, it's not that like every kid needs to go to America, but it's just every kid needs to be able to be coached well wherever they're playing.
Group you have, what I would say, and based on what you're saying, because I agree with that, and I like to say this on the heels of that, you're never, just so you don't think I'm just totally blowing hot air. I mean, I think I've prefaced enough, right? But there are traditions. There are like just homegrown, hundreds and hundreds a year, whatever, things about societies, about countries. And as you kind of move that up, sports that became like the juggernaut of of a community of a country, right? Again, Gaelic football, soccer globally, etc. So I'm not saying that this is where like what's over the hump, as I said to you, 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
What does it mean? How do you define success in basketball? And I think one of the things too would be, okay, what I witnessed, and I talked to John Carroll, I had a chance to go out and spend an afternoon with him and his family when I was 2 years ago. I had dinner with them. It was great. We had a conversation because he had a nice career at the University of Hartford, I had coached at the University of Hartford. I missed him. I had moved on before he got there.
We didn't cover any of that because I was going to ask you about that coach, because I watched a clip of him today and he seems like a real hard ass in a good way.
Yeah. No, he's done a good job. I spent,
John Gallagher.
I was there for Dan Leibovitz. And I was there for 2 years, and then John took over. And then if you know anything about the business, which I'm sure you do, it's like being, in a certain company. You got your certain executives, it's a very, fraternal and intimate thing. The four guys. So, I had some other professional avenues when he came on board. But through those discussions, I decided to stay and coach with him, coach under him for 2 years. And then after 2 years, it was time for me to move on. I had some other interests. He was bringing in he was assembling his staff. I was there more through the transition because I'd helped recruit a number of the key players.
Okay.
And he's done a nice job. I mean, I don't talk to him often, but when we run into each other, he lives about 40 minutes up the road, and we'll have some conversation about hoops and kids and, this whole thing. But I think the last couple of years I haven't watched it too closely because it's been now 6-7 years since I've been there.
Long time.
I think he's had success. I think 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, but I think he's had a decent run the last couple of years. And I know John had a great experience with him.
John seems to have flourished.
One of the things I'll say about John Gallagher, great energy. He's one of those guys who will come into a room and he will get the room going. So it'll be interesting to see now that sort of his honeymoon's over and he's been there a while, kind of what the next step is,
For those guys.
John Carroll would be good for you on that. I don't know if you thought
John's coming on tomorrow. So this is interesting. So it should be interesting.
John, I mean, Drago. You tell him Coach Dawson said, I have some great memories coaching with John overseas, at the Sport Dream Academy. And he looks like, he's just so, I was looking on his Instagram.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I did. The Russian guy from Rocky. Ivan Drago.
It was like, man, I thought you were my age, man. Rocky was like, but John is, you don't make him better than John, and the way he came back from that, John Carroll, that is, the way he came back from that knee.
The injury.
And he just keeps, I saw him on his Instagram the other day. He's out there paddleboarding and working on it, rehabbing it. So
he seems very focused. So that's good.
He had a great career. I mean, he was right on cusp. I'm sure not to spoil your conversation tomorrow, but I think if I'm not mistaken, he was on the cusp of having some workouts with the NBA, and so he's like, that's when we talk about taking advantage of some of the movement and progress that has been made in your country. I mean, John Carroll sort of epitomizes that. Like, he's one of those guys that went over, had a great mid-major career. I mean, again, if he didn't get injured, and even, in terms of the coach there, they probably would have had more success. If John they still had a good year, I believe John's senior year, but they might have even got, to the dance or took a step, So Carroll's definitely, I think Flood was a heck of a player. Sean Flood, you know that name?
Sean's coming on now. I said Paul's basically done a great job of hooking me up with the guys from SDA to come on and chat to them. So Sean's coming on.
Great. Yeah, Cummings will give you a whole boatload.
Yeah. But and that's kind of what I'm seeing. Like I'm seeing, and again, like, I mean, look, there was essentially nothing there before Paul set that up, and it's already helped a bunch of lads go over that didn't, that are going to come back and are going to, contribute to the. I think the more players that can go away and play at a higher level, because there's only a certain level you can get to in the Super League, and you're only going to improve so much. So if they can go away to other places and improve and play for coaches they're going to learn more things, and then they're able to come back. And the more people that do that, the richer the kind of, the basketball knowledge in the country is going to get, and the better we're going to get. So I think even open up that avenue just from Paul's perspective has been
Well,
brilliant.
that's what I was telling you before you asked me a little bit about, you tried to just quickly go into the Hartford thing. And by the way, one of the guys that I really enjoyed working for, it was a short stint because talk about different avenues. He decided to take, just professionally ended up in the NBA working at the Bobcats, who, as you know, Michael Jordan ownership there.
Yeah, that's right.
Dan Leibovitz, who I think I mentioned very briefly early on. He was John Chaney's longtime assistant. I'm not surprised. Now he's the commissioner of basketball in the SEC. He's now since moved down to Alabama. He had a stint in the NBA. Was doing some other things professionally now, but just he was actually the guy that hired me at the University of Hartford, and I worked for him for a number of years, and just learned a lot from him. Just in terms of very bright guy, just meticulous, calculated in a lot of ways. And it's funny. It's even though I didn't stay at Hartford, I was there 4 years, which actually is a couple of years longer than a lot of, assistants on the move stay. But like every coach, I've been very fortunate to have enough adversity, right? Where like I said, I went through a coaching change. Coach Lee, Dan Leibovitz decided to move on. Ultimately NBA, then the SEC, got into as a commissioner. Now he's on the sport management side of it. I stayed on with, this John Gallagher, who you'll learn more about from Carol, and learn something from, and then, so I had enough adversity, enough changes, but was also able to be around and work for enough guys where I just feel very fortunate. Like I've learned from each coach.
Picked up a lot. Yeah.
Even if I'm not still with that coach or, just et cetera, et cetera. I mean, as you know, we're similar in age. You start to have different experiences and come in and out of certain circles. You obviously got to keep your core network, but in and out of some of those circles and people I've worked for and alongside, I've just, it's like the beginner's mindset. And it doesn't always work. You find yourself slipping, but you try to pick up. You should be able to take from every person. You want to give, right? You definitely won't be around for even, you won't be around for 4 years anywhere, 2 years anywhere. But I've, Fran O'Hanlon I talked to you about, I just been, Pete Carrill, if you know that name, Hall of Famer. He was an All-American way back when at Lafayette, and then went on to have all those great Princeton teams and coach Sacramento. He used to come back to Fran O'Hanlon, Coach O'Hanlon's camp every summer at Lafayette. So it's funny. I was just, with the time we have on our hands here, cooped up, I was going through some old photos just organizing my office, and I came across a picture of Pete Carrill and Fran O'Hanlon on the dry erase board, Xing and Oing. And I'm like, man, how about that? To have exposure to these guys, like Coach Carrill, Fran O'Hanlon. Fran O'Hanlon worked for Fran Dunphy. Fran Dunphy was the long time, killed it in the Ivy League at Penn. Still, I believe, teaches in the Wharton School of Penn. Don't quote me on that, but did it one time. Then went on to Temple. I told you about Dan Leibovitz, but Dan Leibovitz worked for John Chaney. So being on, conference calls, listening to John Chaney, give us his insight, and it's amazing how fraternal the game is. You could tell a million stories about guys in Europe that you've met. It's just amazing how tight the profession is. And it's like that 7 degrees of separation. It's not even close in basketball. It's like, like 1.5, 2 at the most.
Yeah.
Price,
so true.
My college roommate is close to Pat Price, going back to Pat Price's days in Philly when he was trying to coach in the States. So
that's crazy.
Again, I'm not exactly sure the place, but one of those Phillies. And then I sort of reconnected with Pat Price through my college roommate years later when I got more involved with Basketball Ireland. It's just
that's crazy. Yeah, because I will listen to Pat Price's podcast. He's got one out too. He's doing something quite similar, but he started with a lot of his connections back in the States, and he talked to a coach. I think it's Chuck. I can't remember his name now. I was going to say Chuck Taylor's, but I'm sure that's a pair of shoes. So he basically was saying that he says a lot of times it's about your 6 degrees of separation and trying to get that down to 1. And he was just saying that, and then I started to think, well, actually, like you said, it's probably 1 or 2 really in the basketball community. a lot of times, I remember being over in a camp in Italy, and I met a Portuguese coach who knew a coach here in Dublin, and had said he played with him when he was back in Portugal, and I think his Westbrooks is his name, and he's his son's playing the Super League now. They're a well-known basketball family, and I was in this camp in Italy, and all of a sudden he said, "Oh, you're Irish. Do you know the Westbrooks?" And I was like, "Yeah." Straight away knew them, and he's in Italy, and he's from Portugal, and he just happened to be there, and he knew this guy who had played with him in Portugal, and it's just such a small circle. Actually, the basketball community is just very small. So it's actually, you're right, not
that's the other thing. That's the other thing. That's why I think that university thing, you know, and I'm sure you want to move on, but that's why that university thing is a cool strategy that England's put in place, and you know, Ireland's done to a certain degree. I mean, Garth McGuire keeps popping out because I remember Jim Maurer, a kid I recruited out of Philly Catholic League, played at Lafayette. He was one of the last kids I recruited before I went up again with Leibovitz at Hartford. So this has been around 2008, whatever, 2009. And he ended up, you know, taking, you know, got a master's. You know, we've had Matt Bentley, another Lafayette, actually good friends with Paul Cummings.
Matt came over to Dublin. Yeah,
so we start looking at like the, you know, how you can sort of connect some dots, you know, with career opportunities, networking. I mean, you know, as we just dropped names the last 5 minutes, like it's so fraternal that's another way you can create an edge. It's just really, hey, you give to Basketball Ireland for a number of years and help us build out the infrastructure and base and get us another level up. And, you know, you will get rewarded. It may not be with a crazy basketball specific contract, but you're going to have a master's, or we're going to network you professionally into something, whether you want to do something in sports or technology or whatever. I mean, it's just, you know.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It is thinking about the bigger picture in a way. It's definitely one that the more I talk to people, the way I was looking at it was I'll talk to a lot of people, and I'll probably formulate an opinion over the course of talking to 50 people, and see what the teams are coming out of it. That's the way I'll probably approach it in my head, and I'll kind of look at it and go, okay, I'm starting to piece this all together, and a lot of people will end up having some kind of a theme running through as to what we're missing here, how we could grow it. You know, that kind of it'll be a very general picture, but it'll be some kind of a theme that'll be running out throughout the course of talking to hundreds of people, and I'll get a sense, you know what I mean, for what I think we could do to help grow the game, but then also just the stories that are coming out of it too. So it's kind of both sides of it. But
well, you're easy to talk to. You know, it's
cheers.
I think sometimes these are the best conversations. I mean, at the end of the day, like, you know, you can look someone's resume up. You can, you know, I'm happy to talk to you about any of that stuff. You know, the different specific jobs or experiences I've had. But really, what we've been talking about is sort of what has bled out of those experiences. What, like you just said, like what is obviously the network, who are the people and mentors I've rubbed up against, who's had an impact and influence. And then really, again, just in light of what coaching and sports is about, I mean, sports transcends, you know, that's, you know, how many times have we used, you know, beat a dead horse about transferable and, you know, life skills and different. So the conversation we've had, you know, today is like really kind of what the fruits of, you know, my story, like that's, you know, and I guess the thing that I've grown really, really passionate about, which I would like, you know, to make sure that I get into this podcast, is for young people in the game, there's many ways to get this done, meaning, you know, at least in the States, we get really locked in on, okay, you got to be a Division I coach. And if you want to be a Division I coach, you got to do, these are the steps. And there's definitely some truth to that. But I also think, you know, again, it goes back to the exposure, like you play those percentages and that can become a real dismal narrative, especially someone that's not from the States or, you know, in a different environment or not from a basketball culture or community. So, you know, to me, it's like what I'm doing now is I'm trying to obviously compete like crazy, coach like crazy. I love, you know, a lot of these guys, I say are my friends, obviously I'm trying to kick their butt when I coach against them in prep school.
Right.
And, you know, when I was a college coach, I was trying to be the best Division I coach and program I could be, you know, have an impact on that program. But to me, it's like I think there's something about getting kids understand how to be a platform thinker. I guess that's the best way to put it. How to be a platform thinker around their playing days and their basketball career. And I think when you start to do that and you create a platform, which again is multimodal, and yes, you got to have certain things that are going to even get you on the platform. Like you got to be talented, right? You got to have a baseline level of talent. You have to have a baseline IQ for the game. You certainly got to have a commitment to the game, to getting better and working on your craft. You know, specifically what position are you, what, you know, strengths, weaknesses, working on your weak. I mean, you got to obsess the game. You know, we say at Choate, you got to obsess process. That's our little tagline, obsess process. You know, the process is thrown around a lot, but I do think there's a reason cliches exist, because over time they prove to be true, you know? So, you know, purposeful, driven. I mean, it's semantics at this point, you know, but the reality is like getting, the unique thing about now being a prep school coach, as I said to you a while back, is that you have a little more innocence and integration and balance where you can say, okay, you know, I'm not held hostage to the things about the industry and the game I don't like anymore, or I started not to like, you know,
yeah.
like 1,000 transfers. Yes, I think there's something about opportunity cost. Sometimes the situation isn't right for a certain player or family and they should move on. You know, sometimes it's absolutely correct for a kid to go right to the pros because, again, some of the financial opportunity costs and their background, where they come from. I'm not getting caught in the weeds there. I'm saying conceptually getting kids to understand that, you know, I'm coming from a place now where, you know, my contract, my mortgage doesn't rest on, you know, if we get 20 wins next year. And then I have to bring in kids that I might, you know, I might not recruit otherwise, or, you know, I may compromise my metrics of how I evaluate, you know, holistic coaching or true coaching, or again, this might sound like Jesus Christ superstar. I'm not trying to come off that way. I'm just saying that as you live your life, you have to start to have conviction on how you want to do things. And right now, anyway, the level I coach and the other things I do, the other hats I wear, still in basketball, still in sports, gives way to me maybe having a little bit more of an authentic message and passion. I think one of the things that we can do to continue to build the game, especially as the game becomes more flat and more interconnected and global, there's more competition for less perceived spots, is getting kids to perceive things a little differently. And that, you know, yes, set goals, yes, be totally obsessed and myopic about certain things and dream big, you know, obviously dream big, but, you know, and execute small, like get better each day. But we also, along that path, have to get kids to realize the bigger picture. And if you do that before they get to the cliff, to the end, where, okay, the career's over, they blew out their knee, now they got to put a resume. If you do it, you massage that type of platform thinking earlier, I think you have a better, higher propensity to get them to leverage their experience up to that point, their basketball experience, sports experience, and apply that more swiftly to the next stage of their life. And I think that is lost a lot of times in the big business of sports. Doesn't mean I'm not a competitor. Doesn't mean I don't, you know, again, think there's some, you know, black and white things to the game, right? Like things that need to be done and things you can't do if you want to be. But I think, again, at this point in my career, you know, a quarter way through it, whatever, this has been a great experience for me to take the 8 years of Division I coaching, 6 as an associate coach, experiences overseas with global sports, obviously now prep school, and then interwoven in that just some different things where I was either trying to survive or kind of build this philosophy or build on this philosophy with some of the entrepreneurship. And this has been a great way for me to calibrate like what I'm about as a coach. And it's not perfect. It's messy. You know, change is very hard in the beginning when I've left Division I coaching. That's the other thing I would say to even Division I coaches. I can't tell you how many coaches will text me, like, hey, Dawson, you know, guys my age, but even especially guys older, you know, that all they've done is just that really tight, and it doesn't mean it's a bad job description. It just means it's a job description that in some ways is limiting, and it doesn't give you some exposure and experience in other areas. But where it's just, I've recruited every day as a 30-year assistant, doesn't mean, we don't love the game here. It just, we've broadened our horizons a little bit earlier, and you'll get guys that will say like, what next? And I think that's really a shame, because I look and I understand paying bills, and I get all that, but I'm saying conceptually, like, I think that's a damn shame, because some of the most brilliant, talented, and when I say talented and brilliant, I mean it not like an SAT score of 1,500. I don't mean like, I can speak 7 languages. Yes, there's intelligence baked into being able to take a time test and get a great score, or solve a word puzzle in 5 minutes, or do a math equation or whatever. But I think if you're a coach, right, or teacher, you naturally recognize the whole spectrum, and that there's different modes of intelligence. And I think it's a damn shame to get people that are in that very thing, coaching endeavor, to feel a level of desperation because they don't know how to acutely and in real time apply those transferable skills. And that's something I'm passionate about as a coach. And it just happens to be basketball that I've picked, because I've been a lifer in basketball, as a canvas to continue on that crusade. Not saying it's a crusade, just something that as you start to look at the data and you're a pro, there's a lot of post-career depression among elite athletes. There's a lot of post-career, there's a lot of like, what next? And I'm not talking about the Allen Iversons and the 0.00. I'm talking about across the board. And to me, like, I just think there can be more done. And I think it also can become a long-winded conversation, kind of as it has now. But I think that's, and I don't mean that as undermining you. I'm just saying, just even being critical of me, like I'm talking, to nauseam about this, but where I think it can be very relevant to what you're on your crusade, and Paul Cummings' his crusade, and Colleen and other people involved in Basketball Ireland, is all that starts with the original nurturing. If you nurture the kids the right way and develop them the right way early, no quick fixes, no like one cash infusion that's going to change the trajectory. Yes, it could have a huge impact, but like the academies, and then what's being done in the academies properly, what's not, like what are we doing to coach the coach, what are we doing to incubate and bring back and cultivate the community of kids that have had success in basketball, so they don't fall out of love, so they don't experience post-career depression, like I should have picked Gaelic football to pursue because no one really cares about basketball in my hometown.
Yeah.
So it is relevant. It is relevant.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you say that. It kind of comes back to one of the things, again, talking to guys like Colin O'Reilly was one of these Irish guys who went and played a few years abroad and got to 29 and was like, I could keep doing this, or I could go back and I could, start my second career. So there is a kind of a life after basketball, and it's a long life. So as much as you want to get these guys to the high level, you've got to also, as you say, nurture the other side of things and make sure that they have a realistic view of what happens after they put down the basketball. And even if it's like you said, to channel what you've done into coaching, but then also to look.
And most of them aren't going to coach. Like you and I, you pick whether it's we're one and the same here. I mean, you're doing your coaching is through now an information basketball based podcast, which is cool. I mean, we're definitely going to have a follow-up chat about even podcasting, because it's something that interests me. That art form, that medium is exploding. Everywhere.
I honestly think you'd be really good at it.
But I would, well, I appreciate it. 10 cups of coffee help with anything. But what I would say is that but not everyone's going to obviously pick coaching, and not everyone's going to try to stay in basketball specific jobs. But I also think if people don't feel like they're getting a return as their mind matures. I mean, we're coaching 18 to 22-year-olds, and then 12 to 16-year-olds, or 12 to 18 and 12 minus. It's like glorified gym class, just trying to get the kids to exercise and be active. But when they start to get to a point where they can understand concepts and certain aspects of basketball IQ and the game, right? They start to understand. They're coming in their own a little bit. I'd even say it's probably more like 14.
14, yeah.
14. I say like 7th grade, 6th, 7th grade onward, if they don't feel like they don't know better, but when they get to the end, if they don't, their mind starts to mature and they become young men and women, and they start to, their life just opens up. If they can't see the connection, if they can't see pulling that thread, that first passion in life along, and they can't see the return on investment as it relates to the real world out there, which they're going to live a lot longer than their basketball experience, of course you're going to have diminishing returns on ever getting some type of program going, let alone a nationwide movement to get a, and again, that's not being, I used very general terms there. That could be anything. Like, one of the things that even at Choate I talk about all the time is I have great administration. I very, very much enjoy Choate. I mean, when I come on campus, it's 420 acres. It's a world school. JFK went to, not to name drop around the school. There's many ways to be successful. My dad went to community college and then, ended up going to Penn State, and did it a different way and became a successful engineer. I come from a lot of my family blue collar. I'm sure you understand that term, like just, working class, educated, but did it different ways, right? And so I'm definitely not pretentious to, you have to have this ranking or go to that school. But I feel very fortunate to be associated with a place like Choate, and my battle, not with certain people, like my immediate supervisors or administration, they've been extremely supportive. However, sometimes when you get in general conversation with people around campus, and this goes for Lafayette, goes for Harvard, Yale, can be a disconnect between the biology lab and the football field or the basketball court. And I think that's a crime. I think that, there should never be a lack of synergy between, what we're trying to get done with athletes. Again, I'm a basketball coach, but whether it's American football, soccer, and what we're trying to discover in the chemistry lab. The mindset is really one and the same at the end of the day. The subject matter might be different. Yes, there might be some things that are a little more difficult conceptually or very specifically, if you're looking at something like differential equations or econometrics, et cetera. But at the end of the day, mindset, man, and transferable skills and those attributes are really what, I'm 40, you're in your 30s. Like, we've had enough life experiences to know that, a test score, whatever, that will get you, a degree, important stuff. Not advocating at all. I think higher ed needs to start changing a little bit. You're seeing some of the panic right now during this, COVID-19 crisis. I'm sure even in Ireland, there's probably a lot of stuff popping up on blogs and in the papers just about how I know here in the States, like my wife works at Brown University. She has a very nice job in higher ed. Like, we've had a lot of dinner conversations the last few weeks, months, just talking about how this kind of will expedite some of the thinking around where we need to change. So, so I think some of that might weed itself out, but I think art, obviously academia here in the States is different in Europe, as you know, it's more of a club-based system. But in the States, academia always first and foremost, that's why the campus is there. But man, the experience of good coaching and a good sports experience, or good, art directing and arts experience, man, there's a lot to be learned there. And there's a lot of education baked into that. So we hear about programs around the country, not so much sports, because there is something about just the heightened entertainment value of American sports. But when you look at like art departments and different programs being cut across education in our country, here in the States, it's tough to swallow. Even though I'm a coach, like I look at an art director, a piano teacher, I look at those people, they're coaches. Like, they're coaches, and they're just on one other fringe, but there's a lot of commonality, and that commonality, that bridge goes through the biology lab. And that's why there should be great synergy across all three. And there are. I'm not indicting everybody, but I think that, I think that's something that we really should continue to look at. And I kind of went off on a path there from what we were talking about, but just to give you more of a feel of kind of who I'm about as we get to know each other here. Like, you
Yeah,
know,
that's interesting.
it's just, and I think, I think that is probably point blank one of the ways you can compensate in Ireland specific to what you're trying to build in basketball. Yes, we need good players. We can't lose the good players to Sweden and other countries, et cetera, et cetera. But, what is more of a broader picture we can paint for these players so they do want to be, wholeheartedly and passionately involved and stay involved and help create that cycle where they're giving back to a point where you can get it to the next level and the next level. And all of a sudden you're out of the small group, competition or whatever.
Yeah, that's it. No, I like that. And actually the synergy part, I don't want to use the word silos, but yeah, you want to try and bring as much basketball knowledge as there is in Ireland together. And that's going to help, if everyone kind of is on, I don't say the same page, it's a bit of a cliche phrase, but yeah, I kind of see that there might be better ways to collaborate with other people that are doing basketball stuff in Ireland. That could be one thing that we need to maybe look at in the country, is to try and, there's a lot of maybe people doing different things in different parts of it, but maybe under the umbrella of Basketball Ireland. I don't want to bring Basketball Ireland into it too much, because again, I'm just totally new to back into the country and I don't know enough about it, but it's just interesting. There's definitely something there.
Basketball in Ireland.
Yeah, exactly.
Basketball in general in Ireland. Yeah, you guys were clever to name it Basketball Ireland. We don't say Basketball America. I guess we say USA Basketball.
USA Basketball, yeah.
So really what we should say is Basketball in Ireland. Basketball, we're going to build basketball, in countries that aren't otherwise known for basketball. How about that?
Exactly. We don't have to agnostic. Is that what she said? Yeah. No. I do agree with that, and it's almost about reaching out to key guys and then, just having a conversation, like you say, because you probably know half of them, but they're all trying to do their own thing. Whereas if you bring a lot of people together who are doing good things, it could help speed up the process definitely, and try and grow the game. That's the key part.
I've been impressed by what I'm seeing the last couple of years. First year, it was just getting a feel for it. This has been 4 or 5 years ago now. But the last, consecutively, the last couple of years,
great.
I'm over the work camps and different events. And then more people I'm exposed to. Obviously, Paul Cummings has done a great job introducing me to different folks. And, the Paul Kellers of the world and Matt Hall, et cetera. I mean, there's a group of like 12 of them that it's like the Pony Express. They couldn't work fast enough to just spread the word and their passion for building the game throughout the country. Again, I'm sure there's a host of them I haven't met yet, but I've been impressed, Mark. I mean, I think you're just coming home. Cool. Is that right? You're just getting back, you said?
I'm back about a year now, so I just kind of figuring the scene out and just seeing what's here and seeing, I kind of taking the lay of the land at the moment, if you know what I mean. And then I'm just seeing.
But there's a start. I'd be curious to see how you continue to embed yourself. And this is great. I mean, anybody that you want me to introduce you to, with people I've rubbed up against, I'm sure, again, I've been very fortunate to this point in my career to have met some great, people, brilliant people, mentors that, a lot smarter than me. You know how that goes. Never be the smartest in the room. That's easy for me to do, but I've been fortunate to be around some pretty, and when I say smart, just, as I said to you earlier about why you coach and how you want to push, just holistically intelligent people like that are in it for the right reason. So if you ever want to touch base with any of those folks, be happy to connect you.
Yeah, that'd be amazing, Drew. That was awesome. I'm just aware of time here because it's 11 o'clock. I had a whole bunch of questions that I'm glad I didn't stick to, because that was way better. So
we can talk again.
Listen, I'd love to. Yeah, absolutely. Look, Drew, that was amazing, and touched on a bunch of stuff that I wouldn't have expected to talk about, and I much prefer that. So it was like we were in a pub having a chat.
Well, you're easy. Like I said, I look forward to meeting you. I enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Passionate about something. Hopefully, at the least, even if people thought I was rambling or disagree with much of what I said, we always say, when the kids at Choate, I always say fountain or drain, man. You can direct a fountain, drains we have a problem with. So at least, you feel the energy around coaching in the game. And I'm really curious to see, where the game in your country goes. And then obviously you coming back off of your pro career and what you've been doing, I look forward to following your progress and career. So
yeah, and I'll keep an eye out for Choate as well. Oh, Dan, thank you for coming on. And yeah, I really love your passion for the game. I think you've got a lot of good ideas there that you just threw out in a very colorful way. So thank you for sharing those. I really appreciate that.
all right.
So that was brilliant, Drew. And listen, take care.
That was quite the crack. Is that what it was? That was a great time.
You had great crack tonight. Cheers, Drew. Okay, well, listen, take care, and listen, I hope your kid as well, and best of luck with all that.
All right, have a good night. Talk to you soon.
Cheers, Drew. Thanks again.